The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Friday. Can anybody feel it? I can feel it. It's in the air, and it's spring, and it's Friday. What a wonderful thing. We're going to be with you for the next 3 hours, and we're going to be talking about topics having to do with autism and helping all of us, myself and you and everyone around the world, to be more efficient, more effective working with our kids on the autism spectrum. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a practitioner, I know that it's important to you to be as effective as you possibly can. We know that our kids are so worthy of every possible thing that we can do to help them, and that when we do the right things and we do them often enough over a period of time, they make progress. This is what we know for a fact. One of the things that we talk about a lot here is ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. This is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. And what's great about it is not only has it been scientifically proven to be effective, it's been scientifically proven to be effective with all of our kids. All of our kids can make progress. So we're going to talk about how we do that, how we deliver it, how we're a part of our kids' team, how we can be the best possible ABA practitioner in our children's lives. And that's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, because if you watch the show, you know I am not an expert in ABA. I am not an expert in behavior. I'm not an expert in autism. I'm a mom with a child who was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. He's now he's going to be 9 this summer, and he had the benefit of the best ABA therapy that there is available here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So if it seems like I'm a big fan of CARD, it's because I am, because they gave me back my child. That's the long and the short of it. And so I am. I'm a big fan of ABA. I'm a big fan of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And I'm even a huger fan now because after my son got so much help, I've been able to see that they are committed to helping all of us. All of us. That's why I'm here. That's why they've put me here in this studio, to be a conduit for you, because they know that all over the world, there are people who need this information, desperately need this information, and don't have a clear, free avenue to get the information. So I'm here to be your conduit. If you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have concerns, things that you want to bring up, things that are working for you, things that aren't working for you, questions that you have, frustrations that you have about making it work, because we know that getting ABA therapy is a battle in and of itself, right? The funding, are you fighting for insurance? Are you fighting for private funding? Are you fighting for grant money? Whatever, it takes to get it done, right? So we're a clearinghouse of information here, and I want to be able to help you to get the information that you need so that you can get started working with your child doing ABA. So tell me what you need. This is meant to be a conversation always, and there are lots of ways for you to participate in the conversation. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, we welcome you here. We're so thrilled that you found us here. You'll see that across the top of the screen where I'm speaking, it says either live or rebroadcast. If it says live, you've got a question box right there. You can type in your question, and it shows up here on my screen in real time. You don't have to log in. There's no credit card. There's nothing. You just type in your question and I'll get it here, and I'll hunt down whoever it is that we need to be able to answer the question. So that's one way of getting a hold of us. If you're seeing rebroadcast, you can still get a hold of us via email. That's one of the ways that you can get a hold of us. And you can do that any time of the day or the night, wherever you are in the world. Send it off to us. We'll get it the next time that we're in the office. We'll answer your question live on the air, but we'll also send you a typewritten response. So we love it when you participate in that way. By the way, if you're watching us in any one of 1,000 other ways, you can also email us as well. But you can also phone us. If you, some people don't like to type, you'd rather be chatting with somebody, get some, direct answers in that way, you can. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Pacific Standard Time, give us a phone call. There are people standing by to answer the phone. If you ask and we're on the show live, they'll patch you into the studio and you and I can be having a conversation live on the air. But if you don't want to, if you're shy, that's okay. There are people standing by to talk to you even when we're not on the air during business hours. By the way, you can also Skype in with us too. If you want to Skype in, and if you've got a video component on your computer that you can press your video button, you can be side by side with me having a conversation. We were talking to Polly Tomey via Skype yesterday. So a wonderful opportunity for you there. But I mentioned that there were other ways of watching us as well, and I want to talk a little bit about that. You can be watching us on Blip TV now. This is a direct result of you guys writing in and saying, hey, this is something we would like to be able to stop, pause, come back, rewind, and be able to reference shows in a really easy way. So you can do that now on Blip TV. There's the address right there. You can go there and subscribe to us if you would like to. We also are on YouTube. I love on YouTube that segments are a little bit more cut up so that you can look at just a small amount of something and by a topic and say, hey, I really want to watch the interviews with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox because I'm really interested in the research. And so you could be watching all of those on YouTube in a really easy way. Or if there's another topic that you like when we do food segments, you can do that on YouTube. We're also on iTunes, and you can again subscribe or download individually. It's all free, by the way. There's no cost to download. Right now, you can download the full video versions, and again, be fast forwarding, rewinding, keep a catalog of them for yourself on iTunes so that you can be watching them on devices that you have. And very soon, we are going to have the audio-only versions so that if you want to take those on the go in the car and be listening in as we talk to different experts, you'll be able to do that very shortly. I know I told you earlier in the week that you could already do it, but I was mistaken. That is coming. It's in the works. By the way, you can also get in touch with us via Facebook. Facebook is a wonderful way to be having conversations with us because not only are you talking to us and we're talking to you, but we see that you start talking to each other, and it's wonderful to have a community on this journey, isn't it? Okay, you can also tweet us. And I'm fairly new to Twitter, but it's fascinating, this Twitter thing, a very fascinating thing. So you can be tweeting away to us, and we really appreciate that as well. If there are more ways that you would like to be able to watch us that you are aware of, that you say, oh, we're working on a bunch of different ways for you to be able to find us and watch us, but if there's something that you know in particular and you go, I really would like to be able to watch you in this medium, let us know, because we are seeking all those different ways so that it works for you. That's what the whole point is that we want for you to be able to have this information in a way that works for you and your life. I know you're running out to go here to OT, and you got to go here to have your child be assessed, and you got that piece of paperwork to fill out. Your day is full, and we don't want to make it any more difficult. We just want to be a home for information for you in a way that's conducive for you. So let us know in any one of those ways how we can be of better service to you. That's really important to us here. Hey, we like to start every morning with something that I fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. We know that this journey is so jargon intensive that it can really sink your battleship. You're in a place where you're wanting to get help for your kid, and you're asking an expert or asking somebody at school, what do we going to do about this? And the answer that you get seems like it's a foreign language because it is so full of jargon. And when you stop and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what you just said, can you explain it to me? Then it either takes this whole period of time when you could have been working on something for your child and now you're having to get educated about what this term means. And frequently they then use more jargon words and you have to have those explained, right? And it takes a whole lot of time. Or, you know, you're at home and trying to look things up in a dictionary can be very frustrating. So we like to teach ourselves the same way that we like to teach our children, a little bit at a time, manageable bites, right? Because what we find is that we don't get frustrated that way, and over time we build up a repertoire. We make friends with the jargon. I'm still trying to make friends with the jargon. Some of the words I have and others, right? It's all a process. It's all a process. So we take one word, one phrase, one anagram a day and pick it apart. We give you an actual definition and then a working definition that's a little bit more simplistic. So let's take a look at today's word. It is intraverbal. I know. Did we think years ago that these were the kinds of things that were going to fill our day? I didn't, but here we are anyway. Okay, intraverbal. And the actual definition is an elementary verbal operant that is evoked by a verbal discriminative stimulus and that does not have point-to-point correspondence with that verbal stimulus. Ah, well, that makes it crystal clear, doesn't it? Aren't we glad we invested the time in that? Actual definition. This is the kind of definition that I'm talking about when I say sometimes you look something up and it's worse. Great. An elementary verbal operant that is evoked by a verbal discriminative stimulus, and I've gone to sleep by this point, right? Okay, so let's look at what our working definition is, see if it's a little bit more simplistic, and then we'll see if we can't explain it even further. Something somebody says in response to the language of another person, conversational language. Okay, so that's a little bit easier to understand, but there are going to be times when we're teaching language, when first we're going to teach the expressive label for something, then we're going to teach the receptive label for something. Now, these were our jargon words earlier in the week, expressive and receptive. So let's say that we're teaching the word dog, and we want for the child to be able to express the word dog when they're talking about dog, right? So we want them, I can't remember what the sign is for dog, but we would want to either teach them the sign or some kind of gesture, or to point to a picture that has a dog, or the vocal word dog, depending on where the child's current abilities are, right? If vocal speech is something that's really, really difficult, we may be working on it in another way in order to reinforce it and get back to the vocal speech. We don't give up on the vocal speech, but sometimes it's easier to teach the functional communication skills and come back and add the vocal speech. But let's say for a moment that the child is progressing with vocal speech. So we teach the expressive label for dog. So we're getting the child to first say dog, and in a coax, we say dog, the child says dog. Then we're going to be pointing to this thing and saying, you know, what is it? And the child says dog. Okay, so the child can express dog. But we also need to teach the receptive label for dog, that when we say dog, that the child hears dog and understands dog. That's the receptive label. So we might put a picture of a dog or a statue of a dog and say, give me the dog. And now the child has to hear dog. They're not saying it, but they understand, okay, it's a dog. Great. Well, that's great, and we've taught the expressive and the receptive, but we now need to teach the tacting of it. We're going to talk a little bit about tacting, so that at some point the child is going to spontaneously see a dog and point and go dog, and that's a way for them to be pointing it out to us. That's tacting. But eventually we want the child to be able to use the word dog in circumstances that are interverbals. So if I say, what has 4 legs and a tail and likes to chew on bones in your house, and I haven't used the word dog, and the child listens to everything and says, a dog. That is an interverbal, because I didn't say the word dog, but it is the answer for them. And likewise, that they can start a conversation talking about a dog so that I say dog from both sides of it. So an interverbal is part of a question or an answer that was not in the question or the answer. I feel like I've made it worse explaining this. But if I say to you, you know, what's something that's yellow that's in the sky, and you say sun, that's an interverbal. I didn't say sun in the question, but you answered with sun. And it's just a deeper understanding of language and a way to use language so that we get that global understanding of a word, that they're not just understanding dog from one perspective, that they can think dog, they can see dog, they point out dog, they're saying dog, they're understanding dog, and they can respond with dog even though somebody has not said the word dog. So interverbal is the part of it where they can answer a question with that term without that term being in the question. I don't feel like we really, I hope that's clear. I'm guessing it's not. But you know what? If it's not, stick around, because I think it's sometimes easier when you see your child doing it. That when your child starts to be able to use these words in a conversation, and that's really what we're trying to get to in our working definition here, it's conversational speech. There's no mimicry in it. We haven't fed it to them. They're answering these things. They're really cognitively understanding what a dog is, which is a very exciting thing. It's a more advanced skill. Obviously, it's not something that you're going to work on immediately with a child who's just starting to gain functional communication skills, but it's where we're headed, so that a child has that global understanding of a word. Okay. We also always have a question of the day for you. The question of the day is meant to get you thinking, participating. We love that so many of you answer this now on Facebook. And that's a wonderful thing. Some of you will tweet in. There are lots of ways to answer the question of the day, but we really appreciate your answers to the question. And I think it has a bigger impact too, because I see you guys looking at other people's answers and being uplifted by them. Even when it's a day when we're complaining about something, you guys say, oh, I'm not there. You know, that's not my day today. So it can be very uplifting. So today's question is, what's the best decision you've made? And it can have to do with autism or not, because everything doesn't always have to do with autism, although frequently in the early years it does. But what's the best decision that you guys have made? And I know I can say without doubt, you know, I love Gene Siskel used to say to people when he would interview them, what's the one thing you know for sure? And now, and Oprah loved that so much that she asks that now always in interviews. And the one thing that I know for sure is that the best decision that we made was to make it a priority for my child, for my husband and I made this decision together for our child, that we were going to do everything that we could for him to have the best ABA therapy. It was not easy, and we still have, you know, issues, and probably will for a long time financially, as well as other things too. There were things that had to go by the wayside, right? It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't easy to carry out. And there were days when I thought, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. I don't know if we're going to be able to follow through on what we said. But we kept on saying, no, this takes priority, and everything else, not so much. And that's the best decision we ever made. I've said before that in the very earliest of days, when we were really having to fight to get our program in our home. And keep in mind that I live in the great state of California, which funds ABA therapy, right? And they have for a long time. We're now switching to the insurance system, and it's going to be bumpy for everybody, and everybody needs to fasten their seatbelts and get that mindset of, we're going to get through this. And it's going to be better, but it's going to be unpleasant for a while. But even before, when they were funding it, you still had to fight for it. You still had to fight for it, and you had to fight hard for it. And we did. We fought hard to get what my son needed. And there were a bunch of people who were standing around and telling me that we were crazy. And more words, even more incendiary than that, telling us that we really were barking up the wrong tree, that we were mistaken. And, you know, when you haven't done something, it's easy to doubt. I had seen things, and I had seen other children, and I'd seen the progress that they had made, and that was what made me believe that we needed to do ABA. But we hadn't actually done ABA yet, and I didn't know 100% for sure that my son was going to respond to it. But I still had to forge ahead with that belief, and that's really hard sometimes because there's people around saying, you know, it's not what you think it is, right? The naysayers. And I would always say to my husband, oh, I just wish I could look into a crystal ball. I wish I could look into a crystal ball and look 2 years or 4 years down the road and know that we're doing the right thing. I just wish that we could. And I fought and I fought and I fought, and was particularly combative with a couple of people who, I don't have very nice things to say about, let's say that, who were just very adamant about the fact that I did not know what I was talking about. And people who were in a certain amount of power, let's say that. And, but we stuck to our guns and, ate some stomach lining, right? And it was pretty much a year to the day after we had really dug our heels in and said, no, we're going to do this. We were being asked to put our child in a specific program in a school, and we refused. And actually, whole big long story that I won't go into. But in any case, it was a year to the day later, and I saw the person that I was particularly combative with a student who had gone into the program that this person wanted my child to go into. And this child and I knew this child, and this child had been at the same exact level that my son had been at the year before. They were like, equal and even as you can be in this world of everybody on the spectrum. I thought they had very similar issues. And it was now a year later. And my son had made such progress, that the school had gone from offering him the most restrictive environment to offering him the least restrictive environment. In 1 year's time, they offered him full inclusion. After wanting him to be in the most restricted room. And so here I saw this person walking with one of the students who had gone into the most restricted room, and that had been where my son was. And I saw that this child had not progressed, and that this child still couldn't walk down the sidewalk and hold somebody's hand easily, that was overwhelmingly difficult, which is how it had been for my son a year before too. And out of another place, my son came with his speech teacher running towards me and saying, Mommy, 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 guess what? And I saw the two pictures side by side, and I just, can I tell you the shiver that ran up my spine? And I felt so bad for that other child. So bad for that other child, and I felt so bad for that other child's mother. But it was the crystal ball. It was like being able to look at the two pictures so very clearly and say, here's what would have been had we not done this. So I know that it was the best decision that we made, and it's really important to me to let you know what's possible, because I don't want you to be the mom of that other child standing there because you didn't know. That I can't live with at all. But so I give you the information, and then it's up to you. But I will let you know from my gut, way down deep, the best decision we ever made. The best decision we ever made was to put everything else aside and say, we'll figure this out. No matter what, we're going to figure this out. But I'd love to hear from you. What's the best decision that you made? Because there are still many decisions left to be made, and I want to know about the things that you guys are deciding about now, or the things that you decided about that you go, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we did that. Let's share this information with each other and hold hands, and everybody gets to make their own decision, but information is great when you're making decisions, right? Okay, we always have a topic of the day, and of course we've had the same topic all week long, and I'm sure you've guessed it by now. It's teaching language. How important is it that we teach functional communication to our children? It's top of the line, top priority, huge important. When we give our children functional communication skills, whatever it is, if it is spoken language, yippee, we love that. But even before that, if that's too difficult to get to this week, we want to teach functional communication skills, whether it's gestures, sign, iconic communication systems, using a device, because when the child can communicate their needs, challenging behaviors diminish, and you have a happier child, a child who's more prepared to learn, a child who's more prepared to tackle this tough stuff, which may be vocal speech or may be any one of 1,000 things. But if we get that functional communication on board, there's no end to what we can do with our kids, and progress is at hand for all of our kids. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a lot of different things here today, giving you some academic tips. We're going to talk about IEPs, right? Oh, it's my favorite time of year, IEP season. But at 11 o'clock, it's sort of like the ice cream at the end of the week, right? We get Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in here talking with us in a really simplified way about research. So I'm thrilled that he's going to be with us today. It's really a perfect ending to a long week to talk about what people are looking at, what kind of research, what it really means to us, and not the glossed over things that we get in the media, right? Okay, it's a big day. All right, lots to talk about. Let's take a little bit of a break. When we come back, I believe that, we're doing an academic tip, and in particular talking about community helpers. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes with an academic tip.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, make simple desire requests, I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Friday. And I don't want to forget to mention that tomorrow, of course, is Saturday. And if you live in the greater Los Angeles area, then you probably are aware of this already. But if you aren't, I want to make sure that you are, that tomorrow is the 10th annual Walk Now for Autism. And it is now sponsored by Autism Speaks, but it's a huge event that started even before Autism Speaks was sponsoring it. It is when all of the autism organizations in the greater Los Angeles area get together for one day, raise money, and share information. And it is one of the highlights, if not the highlight of the year. I can't think of a reason why you would not go to this event if you can, right? And I'm going to be there, and Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson is going to be there with me. It is a really exciting event. I think it's life-changing. I don't want to oversell it, because then you'll be like, okay, Shannon, it was good, but it wasn't that good. Except it is. It really is. If you have the opportunity, if you're within driving distance, and it's an early morning, and it's supposed to be 90 degrees out tomorrow in Pasadena, I get it. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you could say, and you might say, oh, and my child, sensory things, and I just don't know. I really want to encourage you. Pack up your child, pack some snacks, healthy snacks, right? Pack the sunscreen, dress appropriately, have headgear and comfortable shoes, and come on down. And I'll tell you why. Because there's going to be a huge resource fair, and everything that you could ever hope to want to know or provide for your child at any point will be represented there in some way, shape, or form. And that's a really wonderful opportunity for you to gain information. But beyond that, what you're going to see are about 25,000 people who are there in support of all of us. They either have a child on the spectrum or love a child on the spectrum. And I think it's worth it to see that. I honestly do. There are just some things in life, I don't know, I'm a very visual person, but there are some things in life that you can know about and think about and feel about, but sometimes you just got to see it, right? And to see that many people, I remember the first time that we went, that I looked and saw the crowd and said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is amazing. If there are this many people who care, then surely we're going to get someplace with this. And yeah, we are getting someplace. It's not as fast as I think most of us want us, but progress is progress, right? We say that all the time. Now, if you're not in the greater Los Angeles area and say, Shannon, quit talking about this because I can't get to this. And I certainly feel you, because there were a lot of things that people talked about in the first couple of years that weren't happening in Los Angeles, or even were happening in Los Angeles and I couldn't get to them for whatever reason, because they were expensive and I couldn't bring my child and so on and so forth. Well, this isn't expensive. It's totally free. Even the parking is free, although plan accordingly, because it takes a long time to park and it takes a long time to get out of the parking lot. If you're not in the Los Angeles area and you're not able to come to this, I do hope that you will at least check out on Autism Speaks, go to and see what the nearest walk is, because they're going to have a resource fair at that walk too. I can't imagine that it could be as awesome as the one in LA, because it's so huge. It's just monumental. But you'll be in a place where you get to meet with your local resources. And we're going to show you clips next Wednesday on Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, showing you the visuals so that you can get a sense of. I don't want anybody to feel left out, but I do want to encourage you, if you're close enough, please come. And if you see Nancy and I there, please come up and introduce yourself, because we feel like you're a part of our family. And I'm, and I mean that completely. Please come up, and if we're huggers, if you're huggers, take a hug. And if you're not, that's okay. We won't hug anybody that doesn't want to be hugged. I know everybody doesn't like to be hugged, but we'll give you mental hug, right? So please come and find us. We should be pretty visible with camera, but take a look and see. We'll be roaming the event. I can't tell you like a specific booth that we'll be at, because we will be all over the map. But I hope that you'll come. I hope that you'll come and come prepared. Sunscreen, snacks, water. It gets really, really hot. Have some head covering. They do have places, they have quiet rooms that you can take children into to kind of get a sensory break. And I don't plan anything the rest of the day, because I am sensory overloaded the rest of the day. And we don't even listen to the radio in the car on the way home. We just sit quietly in the car on the way home, because it's that big. Okay, I promised you that we were going to give you an academic tip, and I I personally use skills at home. My son graduated from his ABA program almost a year ago. He had 5 years of intensive ABA from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And I've said before, he's doing wonderfully, and he is completely neurotypical, third grade, and excelling in that class and doing just wonderful, and has plans to be a rocket engineer and talks all the time about when he goes to college, and it's a wonderful thing. And he talks. Now, my son still struggles with some things. There are still some things that he continues to work on, and we work on them in skills. And so I'm a big fan of skills, and what skills does is it chops things into 8 different curricula areas, and most of the time it makes sense which curricula areas things are in, and sometimes you go, I don't know why that's in this particular curricula area. But there is something, a lesson called Community Helpers, and it is in the academic curriculum because it's one of the things that kids in kindergarten need to know. So that's the reason why it's in the academic curriculum. But in any case, whether your child, whatever age your child is, and whether they're going to go to kindergarten or they're not, if you're going to homeschool, whatever, it's really important that your children can know and identify community helpers. And it has really far-reaching implications, because we want our kids to know community helpers for safety too, right? But it's really an essential skill that is required in kindergarten. So there's a whole lesson in there, and there's a whole progression about helping our children using ABA techniques. Because again, here are all these things that we know, all right, that's something that I want my child to know how to do. How do I teach that using ABA? ABA, again, if you're new to the program, Applied Behavior Analysis. And the main thing that I'm always reminding myself and you, the main principle of ABA that we really need to engrave on our foreheads is, in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. So whatever we're teaching, we got to figure out how to make it reinforcing to engage in whatever behavior the skill demonstrates. So understanding who community helpers are and what they do, we have to make that reinforcing for our kids. We have to make it teachable, and we have to make it reinforcing for them. And I think making things personal really, really helps. So if you go into the skills program and you look up the community helpers, they're going to give you a bunch of teaching tips of how you can tailor this to this individual child and where they are. But some of the different things that to consider when my son was doing this lesson, and remember, my son was very profoundly affected by autism and was really far behind. He started therapy when he was 3, but most of his skill level was at 1 year of age or earlier. It was devastating, right? I mean, just know that when I heard all that, it was like, somebody, pull my lungs out and take them over there and tromp on them, because that's what it felt like. But clearly we're not there anymore. That's the good news. And you can make progress too. So how do we work on community helpers? Well, what we did with my son, and all of our kids are going to be different, and you're going to think out of the box a little bit for your child and follow the guidelines and listen to the teaching tips and tweak them for your individual child. But my child didn't even know the locations or the uniforms. He hadn't even noticed those people. He kind of was in his own little fog. So what we did is went on an adventure. We were our team of therapists would give me photo assignments, because they knew that was reinforcing for me too. Now you can go online and you can bring up a picture of a police station, right? You absolutely can do that, and you can bring up a picture of a police officer. But because they knew that it was reinforcing for me, and they knew that my child did better when it was really specific, he and I went on a field trip one day, a photographing field trip, and which was a very fun assignment. I still remember us going and doing this, and we went all over town and took pictures of places that we go on a regular basis, and we also took pictures of like the police station and the fire station, and we bopped in for just a second and took a picture of a policeman and saw the desk, and he met the policeman, and that was all really exciting for him, very interesting, very seeing people with their equipment and everything, and we took pictures. And and then we went to the 1-hour thing and got them developed and gave them to the therapist. So now he had this visual. Can I tell you, when we went to the fire station, it was really interesting because he knew a fire truck. He couldn't say fire truck. He, when he would vocalize, first it was blah, 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 right? And then it became Babagana, Babagana. For some reason, that was fire truck. And if he saw a fire truck, it was Babagana, Babagana, Babagana. We laugh now because he loves Baba Ganoush. And so we laugh now and go, you know, maybe that's what he was, but no, he would point to the fire truck and go Babagana. So we went to the fire station, and the Babagana was there, the fire truck, and that was very exciting. And of course, the firemen, I got to tell you, you know, policemen tend to be very busy and they don't have the time to do this kind of thing. But firemen, if there's no immediate emergency going on, they love it when a child comes. And in fact, they invited us back again, and we did come back another time. But if you call ahead and say, hey, I'm coming over with a child on the spectrum because we need to take a couple of pictures and introduce the whole concept of firemen and fire trucks, they will say now is a good time or now is not a good time, and they will be ready for you and dress your child up in the fireman outfit and put them up in the fire truck and get the headphones on them. You get photo op for crazy, right? And by the way, for a lot of kids, this is very reinforcing. Not everybody. You don't want to assume, but and you're snapping away with the photos. It's a lovely, 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 lovely little thing. So we had done all that. We didn't do the whole dress up in the fire truck, the fire suit the first time, but we did get pictures of him in the fire truck. Now, so this is a pretty reinforcing memory. It's exciting for him to start to work on these different things. And they were able to use those pictures that we took in lots of different ways. The pictures of the different grocery stores that we took, you know, they were able to use that in the locations lesson. But then later on, when they worked on safety issues and started talking about, well, when you go to this grocery store, what is the uniform of the people that you would ask for help, right? So that was useful in terms of that. But in the community helpers lesson, they started out with the pictures of the individual people, and they would first mass trial. I believe they started with policemen, but they could have, you know, started with any one of the different exemplars is what they call them. And in skills, you get a list of suggestions, but you can customize it for yourself. But so they would mass trial policemen. Well, it was that much more reinforcing for him because it wasn't just a generic picture of a policeman. It was somebody he'd met. It was a picture that he was there when that picture was taken. So he was that much more excited to be working on it. They still reinforced him with something else that he got the opportunity to play with as a result of being able to receptively and expressively identify who the policeman was. But you know, it was already, there was an element of it that was really cool for him because it had been this really exciting day for him. So when we work on different things, I think that sometimes, again, depending on the child, making it a full experience for them, but using the principles of ABA to teach and think, okay, if I'm going to use the principles of ABA, how am I going to make this as reinforcing as possible? I know sometimes it's sort of like, duh, right? I always say it's the duh factor with ABA. But we can't be responsible for thinking of everything, right? We can be as creative as possible, but you're going to come up with some things that I never even thought of. And, you know, the therapists here have been doing this for a while and have a bigger experience of, you know, and they've seen what works with this type of child and what works with this type of child. So they have some wonderful recommendations. But I think when we share this kind of information, you know, and if we have the opportunity to go, duh, that's a great idea, wonderful. So, but working on community helpers, it's going to help our kids in kindergarten. It's going to help them as they go through life. And it can be a really reinforcing thing for them. And by the way, it's not a bad thing to take your child to those local law enforcement and community helpers, because they get to know your child too. And in case ever of emergency, we unfortunately viewed a terrible, terrible accident on the 4th of July a couple of years ago. And we were very close to the accident. And it was a very frightening thing. It was during a fireworks display and that there was a car accident with grave injuries. And we were very close to the whole thing, and along with hundreds of other people. And police were able to respond very quickly, as well as firemen and ambulance workers. And I know that there was a much stronger level of comfort for my son, even in terms of the things that he saw, because he knew that those were the people who were going to help. He knew that those were the people to trust. He knew to stay out of their way. He had a level of respect for them that made it easier for him to cope with the tragedy and the mayhem. We don't want to have to think about, the what ifs, but we've practiced fire drills in schools all the time, right? Because we know that there's a certain amount of rehearsal that helps with anxiety. And I was able to see in that moment that we had worked in the community helpers for a lot of different reasons, and I hadn't even thought about that one, but it made it so much easier for him to cope with the level of stress that was happening around us. And that was a really good thing. So take the time to work on community helpers. I mentioned, we start with mass trialing, but eventually go into random rotation. If you haven't been here on the show when we've talked about that, stay tuned, because we do talk about it from time to time. And it's in the teaching points. And by the way, it's in CARDI learning too. So if you want to know how to do that kind of ABA work, it's very easily explained in CARDI learning. A wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about IEPs, a quick IEP tip. So stick with us.
Here I stand, a man, someone who has overcome struggles, someone who has endured perceptions of what others thought of him, thinking he was stupid because he was autistic, or simply believing him to be nothing because he was different to them in their minds. But I stood my ground. I just wanted to say to the organization in general, alongside helping me to improve communicatively and socially, the other greatest gifts you gave me were the value of discipline and a good work ethic. To quote Anthony Kiedis, to celebrate you is greater now that I can. You helped me to realize that the harder you work, the likelier you are to achieve success. Having had to work very, very hard to recover from autism, this discipline has continued to serve me well. I also realized that you taught me a lot about and instilled within me a quality of having compassion and sympathy for other people. That you will be concerned more with the needs and wishes of others than with your own is something that I'm awe of and I constantly strive to be. And in closing, the only way I can sum up CARD, all of you, is love. Everything you do to help families in need, you do out of the sheer love of wanting to make a positive difference in people's lives. And as I stand here before you as a mature adult, I have to say that I'm extremely grateful for your unwavering loving commitments to helping others and me recover from potential life roadblocks and become active and contributing members of society. While I can't overcome obstacles without a will, I cannot have a will without the love of those supporting me. And without love, I am nothing. Thanks again so very much for your love, everything that you've done and continue to do. Please give my best wishes to your families, everybody else with CARD who isn't here, and especially all of your clients and their kids. I'm confident that they too will be able to overcome, and I know that they'll be successful with what they do as long as they continue to put their minds, hearts, passions, and best efforts into it. Enough said.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. That was Nick Yates you just saw. I'm a big fan of Nick Yates. What a wonderful young man. Somebody who was diagnosed with autism. By the way, he didn't get to start intensive ABA until he was 4.5 and had tremendous results. And I think he's a junior now in college. He was on the show not too long ago. You can watch that interview on YouTube. Bright, bright young man. And somebody that it's a pleasure to know. So, but I promised you that we were going to talk about an IEP tip, and we've been talking about this because it is IEP season. I know that some of you have already had your IEPs, and we talked last week about the fact that one of the biggest things that I can offer for you in terms of IEPs to help you to have a better, more productive IEP is to make sure that you request in writing at least 48 hours in advance that you're going to bring a tape recorder. You have that right. That is your right. So that was our big tip yesterday, or the last week, and also not to sign the paper there. You have to sign saying that you were in attendance, but it is completely within your rights for you to say, I need to take this home and look at this and go over this with other people. If you have somebody in the family that's a lawyer or an advocate or somebody who at least has legal understanding, but you owe it to yourself to at least go home and take a little time away from it, and later on that night or the next day read through the entire document, because, you know, human error, I'm not saying that anybody's trying to get away with something, but sometimes what was said at the meeting is different than what's on the form, and you want to make sure that the two things meld. You have the tape to be able to say, hey, doesn't match what was said. So you know you're going to be okay, but before you sign it, make sure that you understand what it says on the document at the very least, right? But my other big tip, and this is my personal tip, but I share this with parents all the time, that before, you know, there's a whole thing about getting ready for the IEP, right? How do you prepare for the IEP? And we all prepare in different ways. I really encourage you, if you're on skills, it gives you appropriate goals to go in with and benchmarks and, you know, everything that you could possibly need, and it spits it out for you, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I used to, because I'm an ex-teacher, I used to be researching curriculum and, you know, figuring out, well, these are the goals, and I work with a great team who come in and tell me substantive goals, but that was never enough for me. I wanted to, you know, have be a part of. And skills makes that so much easier. But beyond that, what I would do to organize myself is, and I still do this to this day, is before, in the days before the IEP, I sit down and write out a letter to the IEP team, and that my husband and I sign, and on it I have step by step, here are our criteria of what's important, here is what we need to have on the IEP in order to sign it. And I write everything down. Now, some years that's 10 things, and some years it's 4 things. It really just depends, but I clearly say, you know, this is, it's essential that this be the setting in which my son is learning. If there's a recommendation for a teacher that I want, or a timeline in which I want to know who the teacher is, I put that on there. If, you know, whatever it is, whatever extenuating services that I want or don't want, and I do this for a couple of different reasons, because once I have that all down, I know what I'm going in there looking for, and I don't have to worry about anything else, because there are things that happen that sidetrack you, and somebody says something and you wanted to get into that discussion, but you have a roadmap in front of you. You know exactly, you know, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so I listen for these things. The letter sits in front of me on the table. Everybody can see it, and I eventually read it into the tape recorder to them, but I listen for these things that I go, oh, okay, they just addressed one. Oh, okay, that's already done. We're not going to have a problem with that one. We're in a complete agreement on that. Fabulous, right? And then we move on to, you know, and somebody else is talking, and I go, oh, well, there's the second element. Great, this is working great. There's usually 1 or 2 things on the list that aren't answered, though, in the meeting. And usually what happens is that you go to your IEP and they make their offer of FAPE, right? Which is free appropriate public education. And they will say those words, and they will say, our offer of FAPE includes, and they've decided all of this before the meeting. Because there's a level of preparation that they have to have decided what their offer is. They've done whatever assessments, and they say, so based on everything everybody just said, here is our offer of FAPE. Now, you have the ability to negotiate that and say, we disagree, that our position is that FAPE would also include X, Y, and Z. And then you're in a negotiation and having a conversation. Well, if you take the paper home and you say, I want to read it over and da-da-da-da, and then I want to come back in, and then you offer something back in, it can be this long drawn out, and it's this whole thing about balls in your court now. And I like to leave the ball in their court always. So they know that I'm not going to sign it, because they've been through this with me over and over and over again. Then I'm always going to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to take it home. Even if it had everything on my letter, I would still say I need to take it home to read it over to make sure that it's there. But usually there's at least one thing on the list that needs to be addressed. And so instead of making a letter after I go home so that it takes another 2 weeks for them to answer it, I don't like to do that. I like to expedite, that's the word I want. So I have the letter all ready and signed by my husband and I. So they do their offer of FAPE, and I say, here is what, and I read the whole thing, regardless of whether they've already addressed some of it or not. And I make sure that the tape recorders are still whirring when I do it. And I read it in and say, here are what's important to us. And I will comment and say, clearly we're in agreement on that. And go on to the second thing, clearly we're in agreement on that. And here is, the thing. And so and when I'm all done, I'll say, so we will look forward to hearing your response to, numbers 3 and 7. Whatever. And we hand them over the letter, and I have a letter in my possession, a copy of it, obviously, but we hand it over to them, and then the meeting packs up and whatever. And usually within a short period of time, I hear back saying, okay, we cannot offer you number 7, or yep, we can. And then the discussion continues. But I want you to know that it's a negotiation, and that what happens when you're clear, because sometimes you go in and you're so nervous and somebody says something and afterwards you say, I wished I'd said, or I forgot to bring up, right? And the letter for me makes it impossible for that to happen. Anything that is important to me is on that letter, and anything that isn't important to me, not on the letter, I don't need to discuss it. So somebody brings something not up on the letter, I let it go, because there are times that things will happen and you go, that's irritating and I'd like to discuss that. And you go, it's not on the letter. It's not important. And it's so important that for me, I have to remind myself when I'm going into the IEP, it's not about being right? Because you can get into somebody a discussion because you're right? But that's not what your child's IEP is about. It's not about being right. It's about making sure that your child gets set up for success the following year with appropriate services. That's all it's about. And if I have my list, I know exactly what I'm going in for. I make sure that the list is reasonable, that I'm not asking for things that are inappropriate. I also make sure that I am not asking for things that are the best. I know as a parent that rankles every time. It's still hard to say all these many years later that the school is not legally required to give you what is best. They're only required to give you what's appropriate. And I put everything through that filter. I have an opening statement in my letter that says, my child has a diagnosis of autism, been documented in this way, and this way, and this way. And he, we know that he has sensory issues. We know that, this, that, and the other thing. And as a result, we feel that the following is appropriate for his continuing ability to access the curriculum. And I word it that way, that these things are necessary and important and appropriate in order for him to continue to access the curriculum. And so that's the way that is all worded. I don't say, I want to fight with you about this. I don't say, my child deserves what's best. It's just what's appropriate for him to be able to successfully access the curriculum. And by the way, part of the curriculum and part of what FAPE says is that the child has to be having social skills developed. There's very specific language. We need to get Bonnie Yates back in here. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing all this. And we'll put in a call to her to come back in. But there is a phrase that's specific to social things and preparing a child. Part of their education and part of their curriculum is preparing them for ongoing to be able to function in society. So when people don't want to include, for instance, an aide at lunchtime, that's what comes under that heading. And that you can argue in terms of, well, that's not appropriate because he's supposed to be accessing the curriculum, part of which is social. And that, in that playtime. So we'll get Bonnie back in here. But I want you guys to know that if you take the time, and I've shared this with hundreds of parents, probably thousands of parents by now, and said, write a letter. Write a letter, get it all clear, spend the time. That's how you want to prepare and say, this is what is so important to me for next year. Get it so that the statement is clear, so that there's no possibility that you're going to get sucked into discussions that have nothing to do with what's appropriate for your child for next year. And you're not going to leave anything out. You won't be, suddenly sitting up straight at night, 2 nights later going, oh, I can't believe we forgot to talk about this. It just won't happen. That's what I'm doing this week, is getting my letter together. And I encourage you to as well. It's been very effective at keeping me on point and reasonable and getting what is appropriate. So take it or leave it. That's my suggestion for this week for IEPs, but absolutely request in writing the tape recorder. Okay, it is time for us to go to the A word. This is the wonderful documentary that's being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders following Jack Riley, a little boy who was diagnosed with autism, whose parents have made that really important decision to do ABA therapy and work with their child in this way. So he's getting ABA, the best ABA therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. He's not yet 3. Take a look at the progress that he's making this week. We'll talk in a minute.
Jack Riley starts his day with Jessica and ABA therapy at 8 a.m. Each session he has lasts around 2 hours, with a total amount of therapy of 40 hours per week. This includes occupational therapy, speech therapy, and ABA therapy.
What do you want to play with today?
Train.
That's what I thought. Yay, there you go. There's trains and tracks. Nice.
So what's an average of programs you try to get done in a session with a kid?
I try to incorporate a lot of things as much as I can. Like, for instance, if he was playing with trains, I'd incorporate functional pretend play. So that's just basically teaching him how to play with the toy appropriately, the way it's supposed to be played. Building a track and having him move and using vocalizations. Choo-choo, let's go, all aboard, things like that.
Choo-choo.
All right, say all aboard.
All aboard.
All right. Because he's so little, we're building a lot of language. It's language, 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 all the time. So we work on banding, so having him request for things for me.
What train? What trains? What track?
We can also work on tacting, which is having him label, like the colors, the names of the trains.
That's the trees. It's Thomas.
It's Thomas. Also, we can work on gaining attention. I would withhold the preferred trains or tracks and have him tap my shoulder to get more pieces.
He wants to go.
Hi, what do you want?
What train?
You want trains. We can also work on compliance, like come here and give it to me. Wait. Come here. So there's a lot of things I can kind of incorporate, at the same time in one sitting. And as far as his behaviors, I haven't really seen anything. Hey, sit up! Well, just now. Yeah, with his visual stereotopy, his is just looking at things from a different angle or sideways or upside down. But he rarely engages in that except just now.
What?
Pickers.
Huh?
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
I'm filming you.
That's cool.
That's cool.
Can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Say hi, everybody.
Hi, bye.
Who is that?
Jack.
Jack? Jack who?
Jack Riley.
Where's your nose? Where's your ears? Where's your eyes? Where's your chin? Ooh.
Where's your teeth? Is that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your head? Where's your tummy? Okay, I'm gonna need you now. Give me clothes. Good job.
Jessica and Jack Riley are continuing to work on categories.
Give me vehicle. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Give me vehicle. Nice. What's a fire truck?
Fire truck.
What is it?
Vehicle.
It's a vehicle. Cool. Give me clothes. Good job. What's a dress?
Clothes.
Clothes. Nice. Here you go. Here's your sticker. Give me furniture. Nice job. What's a table?
Furniture.
Furniture. Perfect. Give me clothes. Good job. What's a jacket? What's a jacket? No, what's a jacket? No. Hey, hey. What's a jacket? No, what's a jacket? It's
It's taken.
What is it?
It's clothes.
It's clothes. So what's a jacket?
Clothes.
Clothes. Good job. Here, put Tigger on. Yeah, you're all done. You want your trains or bed?
Taste.
Okay, go play with your train.
Okay, we'll do the book. See my toe.
Welcome back to Autism Live. That was the A word, and we love to show you one episode a week. And there's a reason for that. Because I like to talk about the episodes and kind of pull them apart and go, did you see this and did you see that, and talk about different elements each day of the week. But you can be watching from the beginning and you can watch ahead, because we haven't covered anywhere near all of the episodes. And what I love about this is you really get to see the arc. But if you're only watching one episode, if you've turned in today and you say, okay, that was really interesting, but I don't know why Shannon's so excited about this. I really think you got to watch the arc. So that you see the progression of how in ABA that you start with a small little skill and that it turns into this steamroller of skills that a child is able to do. So that we see at this point Jack Riley, and we were talking earlier about manding and tacting, the expressive and receptive labels, and we're seeing that language starting to build. And they're at the point where they're working on categories. So, he's learned the expressive label for things like shirt, and he's learned the receptive label, so he understands what a shirt is. But now he's learning that a shirt is part of a category called clothes, and that a jacket is part of a category called clothes, and that socks are part of a category called clothes, and that they all have these things in common. And he's not just learning the clothes category, he's learning vehicles. And I know there's something funny about, excuse me, for me, seeing these little kids who haven't had a great deal of language and they're starting to gain language, and yet we're teaching them these crazy things like, there's a category of things called vehicles. And I remember when they were teaching my child this and I was going, what? Like, let's get this child being able to have a conversation. We're really going to teach him the word vehicle? Seriously? Except that part of the way that our kids need to learn and get caught up, because they haven't been picking the things up in the way that a typically developing child would. We are going to teach them some things that seem a little extra advanced, because we need to be able to give them words to classify things so that they can put things together. It may seem a little strange, but in actuality, it's quite brilliant. I have video that I took of when my son was little and he was learning categories and features, because features is another lesson. And they were working on different characteristics and features of animals at one point. And there's like a 2-day progression where you see 2 different therapists coming and working with my son, and how they had worked on what the different animals were. And we had, I mentioned before, somebody had given us at some birthday a Noah's Ark, a Fisher-Price Noah's Ark, and it had 2 of every animal, which ended up being one of the most useful toys, because they were these 3-dimensional animals and they had different aspects to them. So they were teaching my son, they had taught him the categories, and then they were teaching features of things. And so, for instance, instance, the fact that cars have doors and that birds have wings, right? That these are different features of these different things that are categories. So, and you see him in one of the first sessions that my son is there, and they're teaching him the fact that, well, you know, one of these things has doors, which one, and there's, you know, a bird there. Obviously, a bird doesn't have doors, but he's got to think that through. And it was very interesting in the video watching him get this over a period of 2 days. So that on the beginning day, he has no idea what they're talking about, doesn't understand, you know, what. But then by the second day, he's using full sentences. So at one point, Peter Farrig, who is a brilliant ABA practitioner, and who worked very intensively with my son. I call him the autism whisperer. But at one point, he's talking to my son and set up a circumstance, and he says, you know, give me the one that has doors. And so my son gives it to him, and this is on the end of the second days and 2 days, and Peter holds up the car and says, what is it? And my son says, it's a caw, because you know, his language was, it's a caw. And Peter says to him, you know, there's some specific question that he asks and says, you know, is a car an animal? And my son goes, no, it's a vehicle. And just a car is a vehicle. And then a little bit later on, he does something else. And without even being asked, my son looks at him and says, a bird has wings. And what's lovely about it is that you get to see this progression over 2 days, but then on top of that, you get to see how excited Peter Farrig is, because he sees that my son has completely gotten this and that he completely understands what's happening. And you see the reinforcement that happens in that moment, because Peter goes, yes, man, and he picks him up, and you see my son just laughing and smiling, and he's so proud of himself, and he's so thrilled that Peter is proud of him, and it's this wonderful, wonderful moment that I'll never forget, because, you know, it was one little thing. And for him to be able to say, you know, a car is a vehicle and a bird has wings, I didn't think we'd ever get there, right? And it certainly isn't where we stopped, because it led to my son being able to, you know, have the conversations that he does now and have the understanding of language that he does now. And it's just a beautiful moment of that excitement of we're learning and we're getting things. And when I learn things and I get things, people are thrilled with me. And it feels good to understand what it is you guys are talking about. A fabulous, fabulous thing. So I love the A word because I hope that you guys are getting to see that arc. I got to see that arc in my home. And I always refer to it as the autism miracle in my living room. How these pieces, you know, they always have the puzzle piece as the symbol for autism, how these pieces go into the puzzle and fit in. And sometimes you're working on an area of the puzzle and you're putting pieces in, but you can't really tell what it is. And at some point you put in a certain puzzle piece and you go, oh, that's what this is. And that's what ABA is like sometimes. You go, really? Why are we working on that? I don't quite understand what the progression is until one of the other pieces is in and you go, oh, that's cool. That's really awesome. You just taught my child to look at objects and understand that they're not just this two-dimensional thing, that there are aspects of them so that he can see a bird in many different ways other than just this flat thing. So he's thinking and he's connecting and putting things together. It's a really exciting thing. And again, watch the A word, you get to see the arc. So that eventually we get to interverbals, which is what our word of the day was today, having those beginning conversations. Somebody asking a question, somebody answering it with new information. A wonderful, wonderful thing. All right. Well, watch the A word on its YouTube channel. You won't be sorry. And you also get to experience the emotion of what the family's going through at the same time. It's a fabulous thing. On Monday, we'll show you a new episode. I know somebody had written in earlier the other day, we had Suzanne Oshinsky, the filmmaker, on, and somebody wrote in and said, loving the A word, but how come there haven't been any new episodes for a month? You may notice that we're restructuring a lot of different things on a lot of the pages. So there is a backlog now that are ready to be uploaded. So if you've been watching on a regular basis, don't go away. There's still more A word coming. But get yourself caught up. Watch some of the early episodes. See the progress. It's a fabulous thing. Speaking of which, the question of the day was, what's the best decision that you've made? I know you guys have been writing it on Facebook. When we come back, we're going to look at some of your viewer responses. So stick with us. Back in just a few minutes.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community, where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We have a question of the day that we ask you guys, and today the question was, what's the best decision that you've made? And I love the fact that you guys write in and share, because it adds so much to all of our lives. And some of it's poignant, some of it is fun and exciting, but it's all important, right? So somebody wrote in and said, homeschooling my autistic son. And I know for a lot of you, that ends up being an answer that you've got to not only investigate but follow through on. I know it's a hard choice. I feel for you. I hope that you're getting the appropriate support that you need, bringing them at home. I, of course, encourage you to look at skills, not as a curriculum to take the place of what's happening at school, but to support you in your efforts to build the skills that your child was missing, which I'm sure is part of the reason why you took them out of school. But man, do I respect all of you who make the decision and follow through in a big way. I gotta be honest with you that, you know, if there was a moment when I even thought about homeschooling, it was squashed by the fact that my son so desperately needs the socialization of what happens at school. I can't say that we'll always be that way. And some stuff, you know, happens from time to time and I go, this is why people homeschool. This would be it right here. But for the most part, I'm blessed with a wonderful school and with wonderful teachers. And so I am able to send my son to school and have that socialization that's so important for his individual needs. But I applaud those of you who make the hard decision and bring your kids home. I know it's tough and that it's necessary for some of our kids. Another person wrote in and said, working with him daily and never giving up. That's amazing. He has come so far and is only 6. That's absolutely fabulous. Another says, going to ABA therapy worth every penny and every minute. Amen, sister. I'm right there with you. To face our fears. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it too, right? To say, okay, something's going on. I'm going to pursue it and find out what. Another person who said, facing our fears and putting her on the school bus to go to school. She loves her bussy bus, LOL. Man, that's a leap, right? Putting the child on the bus and trusting, but clearly this child finds it really reinforcing. Love it. Another person who says to sue for custody of my then 3-year-old nephews whose needs weren't being met in his previous home. Wow. Wow. What a lucky kid to have such a relative. Okay, that had to have been tough. Another person who says, accepting my child as she is and everyone else, including myself. It's a daily struggle, but worth all the effort. Yeah, we got to meet them where they are, which means we got to meet ourselves where we are and be realistic about it, right? Another person who says to have kids. My life would not be the same without them. I love them more than anything in the world. What a great thing. I love that very often one of the things that I'm not gonna get all welly about it, but I very frequently say to my husband, thank you for giving me the greatest gift, greatest 2 gifts that anybody could ever give a person, for loving me as I am. Man, isn't that a huge gift? And for giving me this child who is just the light of my life. And he always says to me, you know, thank you for loving me as I am and for giving me the greatest gift, making me a father. So that's, boy, it's great when you marry the right person, right? I got incredibly lucky. I waited a long time, but I got incredibly lucky. Okay, another person who writes it and says, staying home with my son and knowing that I was there for him when he needed me. That's a wonderful thing. Another person who says, fighting for custody of my 10-year-old son when his mom decided to start a new life and put him last. He's progressed so well since last September, and I put structure in his life. 3 times he's been student of the month. Wow. He's playing basketball for the 3rd year in a row, and he's doing fantastic. And he says that he loves his son and that he is very proud of him. Fabulous. Another person who says, teaching my nonverbal son to nod his head for yes and no. Something that small has helped us a lot, and I still make him nod even if he's not interested. We talk about functional communication skills and how it is life-changing. And again, the idea that something is small, it rankles when somebody says to me, oh, well, huge progress not being made. What is huge progress? Being able to nod your head yes and no, huge progress, life-changing. Okay, another person who says, to allow my son just to be a kid sometimes. Amid all the therapies and hustle of life, sometimes you need to step back and remember that he's just a kid. For the first 2 years that we did therapy, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, every so often, every pretty much quarter, you get a thing saying to mark down what your child's availability is, because clearly your child has other things that they will, from time to time go and do, whether it's OT or school or doctor's appointments or whatever. So you give them a basic form for the week of when your child is available, and they fit what they can. And in the beginning, of course, especially if you're trying to do a 40-hour program, which we were, it's really important that your child is as available as possible. Otherwise, you run the risk of not being able to fit therapists in at those times. So we didn't mark off anything on the calendar and said, we'll work everything around ABA. That's that thing I was saying earlier, that, the decision we made was to really make it the priority. So for the first 2 years, we just said whatever. So there were times that we had a therapist on Sunday morning. Hi, I'm here. All right. Sunday morning. Woo. But again, for the first 2 years, we said, nothing is sacred. Whatever, time somebody can be here, that we'll make it work, and we'll work everything else around. And it ticked people off, but oh well. And then after 2 years, my son's life had exploded so much, and he was going to kindergarten and having a wonderful time, and there were other things to be done. And because there was so much of the day that he was engaged in stuff that was really reinforcing to him, but not easy, right? We made the decision, and with a shaky hand, because I was like, oh, this is scary to me, I blocked off Sundays and said, we're going to take 1 day a week and say that there's no therapy, that we just get to be a family, and he just gets to be a kid. Which is not to say that during that day, we continued to uphold the principles of ABA and continued to put demands on him, but it was all natural environment and nobody extra in our home on that day, unless, we were doing something and invited people over, right? But no therapists. And it was, I look back now and go, well, that was a really good decision, because it helped us to get to the point where we are now, where we don't have therapists, and from time to time we look and go, this is weird. So at least we had a running start of having 1 day a week, and I would let my son play and build Legos, and we would watch movies, and sometimes go and do things. We would go to Disneyland, and other days we just have a lazy day, a day where we didn't have to worry about everything being picked up because the therapists are on the way. It was a wonderful thing. I think it is important sometimes to just let them be kids. Another person who writes in and says, to have my son at age 39 and my daughter at 44. Yeah. I had my son at 40. I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that I did. But having your kids older, I think it's harder. It was certainly harder on me. And another person who says, not inducing a single pregnancy and having a twin pregnancy, even though the risks were high. Yeah, sometimes we take risks, and they are worth it, right? Because our kids are absolutely worth it. Okay, we need to take a little bit of a break, and I just want to check in terms of, we're coming back and talking about a social language tip. So stick with us for that. And don't forget that at the top of the hour, we'll have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us here in the studio talking about research topics, things that are of interest to us in a language that we as parents can understand. We really love that and appreciate that, don't we? Stick with us. We're going to be back in just a minute.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really, really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. We're talking about how we can be more efficient, more effective, working with our kids on the spectrum, how we can use the principles of ABA, applied behavior analysis, to help them to gain the skills that are going to help them throughout their lives. And I mentioned before that I like to use at home. My son had ABA therapy. He had 5 years of ABA therapy through the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. He graduated from his program last year, but I continue to use skills at home because there are still things that I want to work on with him that I think are beneficial to him. He's doing wonderfully, but there's always more progress to be had, right? And for those of you who are watching at home, we know when our children get an autism spectrum diagnosis that if it's classic autism, then we know for sure that they're going to have deficits in social skills and in language skills. And we know for sure that if they've gotten a diagnosis of Asperger's, then there are definitely social skills deficits. And I think it's all too easy for people to chalk up different behaviors and say, oh, well, but that's just the autism. This child can't make eye contact, and this child isn't good at the back and forth of conversation, and and that's autism. But the truth of the matter is that we know that science has shown that ABA can help our children to gain skills in those areas and have it become a part of their skill repertoire, so they can do these skills and behave in the ways that they need to, so they're virtually indistinguishable from their peers. And I don't mean to make it sound like it's just this gloss, slick thing where they just look like they're indistinguishable, but that they're functioning in a way that's virtually indistinguishable from their peers. And that's remarkable. So for anybody who's out there and you're thinking, okay, well, my child's not social, and whether it's PDD-NOS, whether it's Asperger's or classic autism, it really doesn't matter. Your child can gain skills in those areas and more areas. And I know there's a big long spectrum, big wide spectrum, and you're thinking, well, but not all of those children can be helped in those respects. That's not accurate. All of the children on the spectrum using the principles of ABA can make progress. But, and here's the big but in the room, shall we say, you've got to be giving them enough opportunities, which means for so many of you, and I'm so disheartened when I talk to somebody and I say, have you tried ABA? And they go, yeah, we did ABA. We didn't get the big result that everybody says, and it was really disappointing. And I say, okay, well, how many hours and what kinds of things were you working on, and who was working, and how were they working? And what I'm hearing from people all over the world is, well, we did about 8 hours a week for a year, and I can tell you that it's like my heart goes when I hear that, because what I hate to say to you is it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. You've got to give your child more of an opportunity, and I hate to say that because I know that for many of you, you say back to me, well, we were doing the best that we could. I absolutely get that. But when we know better, we do better. And I'm telling you, 8 hours a week is not enough if you're not seeing skill acquisition. Okay, we got a question. At what age should I worry about, let me show the question to you. What age should I worry about my child gaining these skills? My daughter on the spectrum is 9, but my neurotypical daughter is 4. Neither daughter makes eye contact well, so I've thought about using programs like this on both girls. Okay. When we talk about skill acquisition, let's say this, that all children are different, right? But there are certain things, and we had Dr. Adele Nadowski in here the other day, and she was talking about the warning flags, the red flags, and when you want to do something. And I had a conversation with her prior to that, and I said, how do we want to break this down? Do you want to do it by ages, that these are the milestones we should see by these ages? And she said, I really don't want to do it that way, because the fact of the matter is that so much of the difficulty that we've had is people are getting diagnosed so late. And she said, and the truth of the matter is that we can start to identify problems as early as a year if we're not seeing the kinds of things that we need to see. And she said, I would rather leave it open, in terms of age milestone, because, after a year, if a child is having difficulty making eye contact, it's time to escalate. It's time to look at other things. So I say that to you, and in the hopes that and I don't know when you're saying, when they don't make eye contact well, that can mean a whole bunch of different things. But if you've got a 9-year-old and you've got a 4-year-old, and your gut as a parent is that it's not, when you say not well, what I'm hearing is not what you want it to be, I think that there's cause for concern. And I'm going to encourage you to go and get your kids looked at. Obviously, the 9-year-old has already been diagnosed on the spectrum, but I wouldn't wait any longer with the 4-year-old. You may be told, no, she's fine, but then yes, you're still going to want to work on the eye contact, because eye contact is something that's really important. We can't say that just because someone isn't making eye contact well, that they're going to get a diagnosis or they're not going to get a diagnosis. But the fact of the matter is with a diagnosis, without the diagnosis, you can be working on eye contact, and you can be working on a whole host of other things as well. And, when we talk about, how do I want to work on these things, I like to say to you that there's a model, good, better, and best. And, it's ABA is effective. It's scientifically proven to be effective. So we want to get in there and start as early as possible using ABA. But there's good, better, and best in terms of how the ABA is delivered. If your children, if one is on the spectrum, I don't know what state you're in, I don't know what country you're in, but if you've already got a diagnosis, there's a strong possibility, and especially if you're in the United States, that you are eligible for services from someone, whether it be insurance or through your state. And this would not have been true even 6 months ago, but roughly 50% of the country we're looking at as of July 1st is going to be eligible for, at least 50% of the country, for some kinds of services if you have a diagnosis. And if you have services available to you where it's not going to completely put you in a homeless situation, take them. Take them. Take good quality ones, pick your provider well, but if you have the opportunity, I had people come into my home and work with my son and help me with my son. And that's what I want for all of you. That's the best possible case scenario, that other people are coming in and working with you, and you're all working with your child and you have a team. If that is not possible because where you live or funding issues, that's the best. The next one down is having some kind of workshop model where maybe you've got volunteers that are working with your child alongside of you, but that you're having some supervision and you're having somebody help you to design the program so that you're not completely on your own, because not that you can't do it, because you can, but it's really exhausting and stressful, and it's really great to have people backing you up. I think you're going to reach a higher level if you can do that. But a lot of you can't because of where you live and what the financial constraints are. And if you can't, then the good model is use skills and use CARD learning. And they are effective. We'll show the Maddie video here in just a minute, and you can see that, here's a family who said, we're going to use CARD learning and skills and volunteers, and we're going to create a team, and we're going to make a difference for this child. And man, did they. And Maddie is an inspiration to all of us. And they used the programs in CARD learning and skills and worked on things like eye contact, and worked on things like social language, and worked on all these other things so that you can. Good, better, and best. But whichever place that you can come in and work, that's great. Okay, and I don't know if this is the same person who's writing in, but we've got another question. So about milestones. So I'm going to pop that one up there. Just reading through, and because we want to make sure that there's no personal information before I show it to everybody. Right? Okay, so person writes in and says, I'm curious about working without milestones. My 20-year-old sister has Asperger's syndrome. Next month, she's going to start college and she wants to live in a dorm. She has almost no social skills. She has no friends her age and really never has. She is unaware of how different she is from everybody else, but she is aware of her diagnosis. Does Skills have a program that can help her learn appropriate social behaviors with her roommate? She has almost no empathy, no eye contact, no patience for other people. She also has exhibitionist habits where her body is concerned. Can Skills help her? Yes. Great question. Wonderful question. There are a couple of different areas of Skills that are very specifically going to be useful to people who are on the Asperger end of this spectrum. In particular, the social skills, the executive functions curriculum, and the cognition curriculum. Now, those are also very useful to people who have classical autism, but they are, some of the other things that are in Skills, not as useful to Asperger's, but those three areas are. So in the social skills curriculum, you're going to have lessons in eye contact and how to make it reinforcing. And there are teaching tips that are there, and you can work with this on anyone from a 1-year-old to somebody who's 99, and you can work on those eye contact skills. You're going to apply reinforcement in a much different way, and you're going to want to tailor it specifically, but it's the same basic principle that if we make eye contact reinforcing enough and rewarded enough, then people will do it more often. And we know that this is true. It's been scientifically proven to be true. And I would start very small and work up, but I would target 1 or 2 things at a time. And I am not an expert. I'm going to bring somebody in to talk about, and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox is going to be with us at the top of the hour, and we'll ask him specifically about this. But if you, for instance, if some of the things that you're saying here, in terms of no empathy, no eye contact, no patience for other people. I can list some of the different programs in some of those different curricula areas that are going to be really helpful. And also learning about appropriate social behaviors to work with her roommate. In the social skills curriculum, there are things like social rules, which you can customize and teach someone a set of rules and say, here is how we behave in this circumstances, here is how we behave in this circumstance, and this is how we reward it. So you can tailor it for individual circumstances. And that would be a wonderful thing to be working on now before she goes to live in the dorm, and practicing and making it reinforcing for her to think about things in a different way. In the executive functions curriculum, you're going to be working on things like inhibition. We were talking about this just yesterday, that there are some things that we don't say and there are some things that we don't do. There's vocal and non-vocal inhibition, and realizing that there's a time and a place for things. So for somebody who's an exhibitionist and takes off clothes, whether they are a 3-year-old or a 20-year-old woman, we can still work on making it reinforcing to not follow that instinct to take off the clothes. What we do is give a replacement behavior, so that when that we identify when the instinct comes, and there's a criteria that the person thinks through about, okay, here are my rules about when I feel this way. Is it appropriate? Am I in a place where I can take off my clothes or not? And then we reinforce them on a regular schedule for not taking off their clothes, and put in a replacement behavior of what to do when you're feeling that way, how to cope with, but that means getting to the core of what it is that's trying to be accomplished by taking off the clothes. Is it attention? Is it escape, that the clothes are confining and don't feel good? Is it that, doing that is going to gain access to something or someone? Or is it that it just feels good? We would want to figure that out first, do a functional behavior assessment on the exhibitionism, because then you're going to know what replacement behavior to to give. If it's attention that they're trying to get, you might consider giving attention on a regular basis and noticing, okay, well, tracking, how often is she taking off the clothes? What are the circumstances in which she's taking off the clothes? If it is attention-based, is it a group of people's attention that she's trying to get, or is it just anybody's attention? Because if it's anybody's attention, then you might be able to say, okay, on a regular basis, we're going to give her the social rule. You can't take off your clothes in the circumstance that we're going to go to. And you notice that she goes to do it every 5 minutes. So every 3 minutes, you're going to shower her with attention so that she doesn't need to take off her clothes to get the attention. And then eventually you'll go every 3.5 minutes giving her attention. And then you'll go every 4 minutes, and every 4.5 minutes giving her a ton of attention so that there's no need to take off the clothes, teaching her appropriate ways to request attention at the whole time that you're doing this, so that at some point, when the instinct comes up for her to take off her clothes, instead of doing that, she'll appropriately ask for the attention and not need to take off the clothes. That's one of the myriads of possibilities if it's attention driven. It may not be. The long and the short of it, I would be looking for some help to figure out what the functions of her behavior are. I would be taking data on what she's doing and when she's doing it, but absolutely, there are lessons in skills about inhibition, about learning about other people's perspectives, about feelings, understanding our feelings first. This is in cognition, understanding that we have feelings and how to convey our feelings, how to talk about our feelings. And then we learn about our senses and, all the things that we can see, touch, feel, hear, because then what we do is learn about sensory perspective taking, which is saying, okay, I can see this. Can you see this? And eventually that will blossom into, I'm feeling this. Does that necessarily mean that this person is? And that's how we get at empathy. Because we start to be able to look at things, but it's a multi-step process, all in skills, some of it in cognition, some of it in the executive functions curriculum, but a multi-step process so that you can pull it apart. So eventually the person is able to realize, I'm feeling this. I feel upset, but I'm looking at the body language on that person and I'm seeing it from their point of view, and they're not upset. Why? And what do I need to do to convey to them that I'm feeling upset? And likewise, I'm feeling fine. Nothing is wrong in my world, but I can see from the body language and the facial expression and the tone from that person that they're upset. What are the social rules I need to exhibit to let them know that I see that they're upset? What's the appropriate way to respond to this? What do I need to do? And what do I need to change in my behavior because they're so upset? It happens every day. I was about to say it can be done, but I want you to know it gets done all the time, but it's many, 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 many steps. But as Dr. Jonathan Tarbox says, how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And eye contact is something that you can be working on without even telling her that you're working on it. That you can be working on eye contact, and when, if she is somebody who's attention driven, and when she makes eye contact with you, that's when you give her the attention, for instance. Okay. And the response back was, thank you. Your answer about my sister has been very helpful. I'm going to ask our parents to watch this video in archive so that they can see your answer. And keep in mind, we're going to bring in Dr. Jonathan Tarbox as well and have him look at the question as well. But going back to the first question with the 4-year-old and the 9-year-old, I hope that you'll write in and tell us a little bit more, and I hope that you're going to get more support for the 9-year-old that you already know is on the spectrum. But if you have a 4-year-old who isn't making eye contact, I really want to express to you that is something that can be worked on, and you want to work on it sooner as opposed to later. I don't want to stress you, but that can be helped and progress can be made. And I don't know that there's anything else that needs to be worked on, but I would encourage you to take her in and follow your instinct and say, this is not where, because that's clearly what I heard in your question, it's not where you think it should be. And I gotta say that a parent's instinct is stronger than anything else for me. So follow that instinct through and see what services are available to you. And if you want to write back and tell us where you are in the world, you know, we might be able to help you, to point you to what is available to you. There's our email, or you could call in, or you could just write in on the form in which you started. Okay, we got to take a break, a quick break, and then in just a few minutes, we're going to come back and do one short segment, because I was going to talk about general knowledge with social skills. We'll come back and talk about that briefly, but then we're going to have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us, so don't go away. Much to cover. Stick with us.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3 and shut down. And sometimes you think of the typical Rain Man movie. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up.
She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys, and that was about it. We have a team of 7 volunteers, or 8 now. We have 8 volunteers, including my husband and I. And I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks. And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? What Skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or even our laptop, and she can sit down, and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
At least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing something, missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where Skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this? Good job!
Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before Skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know, and in most manuals you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for Skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November. It seemed like by January something just clicked, and she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new Skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child, because in 7 months' time, she's just blossomed into this normal, functioning child, and suddenly, we joke about it all the time, like suddenly we have twins.
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you could do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I so appreciate your comments and your questions and your suggestions. We just had some questions, and I just want to thank you for writing in and remind you that you can email in, you can phone in, you can Skype in. When we're live and it says live on autism-live.com, you can always be typing in your question, which some of you have been doing and is awesome. And you guys are right now answering the question of the day on Facebook. It's wonderful. And we find that really reinforcing when you guys participate with us. We are like, we get a question. But I also wanted to take a second before we go to break and bring in Dr. Tarbox to talk about, in the social skills curriculum of skills, there is a domain that's called social language. And we know that we want to help our children to be able to speak, right? And there's a whole language curriculum too, to learn how to speak. But then for some of our kids, for most of our kids, there is the whole aspect of it that's social. That how do we conduct ourselves? How do we place our body to be letting somebody know that we're interested in having a conversation? How do we notice when somebody else, when we're having a conversation, when they're not interested, when they've lost interest? How do we repair a conversation when it's not functioning properly? How do we end a conversation? How do we begin a conversation? When we approach a group of people and they're standing and having a conversation together, how do we appropriately enter the conversation and assess whether we have something relevant to say, and then come in at a speed and a pitch that what we say gets listened to? There are so many different components to social language, and when we look at kids and young adults and adults, it's not just kids on the spectrum, by the way, that have issues with some of these things. They're skills, and some of us are better at them than others. And I have a really good friend who frequently says the funniest thing, is the funniest person, is so underappreciated often in a group conversation because they're a little bit shy, a little bit trepidatious, and not on the spectrum, by the way, at all. A very, successful functioning person, but when everybody else is talking and being boisterous and loud, and he'll say something, but he doesn't say it quite loud enough for everybody in the group to hear, and will frequently say, I don't understand how come I say something and nobody acknowledges it. And so much of what he's doing is right, but he's just not saying it quite loud enough for everybody to be able to hear. And a couple of years ago, I said that to this person and said, you just got to be a little bit louder. It's like, really? I think I'm so loud when I'm saying it. Now, this is a completely neurotypical person. So imagine what it's like for our kids on the spectrum. Imagine how hard it is, all these different elements to be able to be included in a conversation. And what's great is that we can work on all of those individual elements separately and have our children be able to put them together a piece at a time and give them opportunities to work on it through, an ABA setup so that they can find it reinforcing. And that's really exciting. But one of the many elements that is often overlooked, and we can teach all these skills of how do you enter the conversation, how do you end the conversation, how do you notice what their body is doing, how do you, all of these things. But the truth of the matter is, if the kids have nothing to talk about, all of these things can be used and it's still going to die. Right? The conversation's not going to take off. Like, when you do a kite and you're struggling, and then suddenly it takes off and it goes, right? So there is a lesson in skills that is called general knowledge, and you'll see it in the social skills curriculum, in the social language curriculum. And the reason why it's there is because it is an important component to being able to hold down a conversation. There are certain things that you need to be able to know, just general topics, so that you can take part in a conversation. Think about this logically. If you're going to a dinner party tonight, and you're thinking about the kinds of people that are going to be at the dinner party, and your brother-in-law is there and he's a big sports fan, and you're thinking to yourself, I need to be able to keep up with the conversation. You might take a minute to sit and look at what's happening in the sports world. You don't watch basketball, you don't watch baseball, you don't watch anything, but you might look on ESPN just to see what the headlines are, so that when somebody says, oh, did you hear about this, you can at least add something to the conversation and not look like a complete and total fool, right? Now, you might be really into sports, so you already know that, but you know that, your cousin Beth is going to be there, and and that she likes to talk about politics. And so you might go to CNN and see what's happening in politics, or just, have a refresher course with somebody in the car on the way over saying, what kinds of things do I need to know? Even if it's something about, what's happening with Mary Beth's twins? What do I need to know going in so I'm going to be better at the conversation? If you're going on a job interview, you like to have a little bit of background so that you've got things to talk about. A lot of our lives, we go into places and just hope that we're going to have something to converse with somebody about. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But the truth of the matter is if we want to have the most successful time at this dinner party, we would have a little bit of awareness of who the people are and what kinds of things that they're talking about, right? Maybe we don't always do that for ourselves, but in a perfect world, wouldn't we all have an assistant who would inform us what kinds of topics to talk about? That's, what very high-level people do. They don't expect themselves to know everything. Well, we shouldn't expect our kids to know everything, but we can help them. We can give them a set of information that helps them to, like if you know that your child is going into kindergarten and asking somebody, what are some of the things that kindergartners are interested in that they're talking about? It's very possible that your kindergartner who's on the spectrum didn't have access to the same kinds of things that everybody else had access to the last couple of years because your child was busy working their way through autism, whether they were in therapy or they were locked in their own little world, they're behind on some of these topics. So maybe you got to do a little ABA lesson about Beyblades. I know, but when they're on the playground and somebody pulls out the little Beyblade thing and they start to have a conversation about it, you don't want your child to, Beyblade, what the heck is that? I have no idea. That's not going to help them achieve the social goals that they want to in that circumstance. So, you become a little bit of a detective asking other people what are the kinds of things that your kids are into. I always say that birthday parties are the wonderful opportunity to gain information because you get the birthday party invitation and you call up the parent and say, I'm looking for a gift. What kinds of things is your child interested in right now? And, it helps you to buy the right gift. It helps you to be social and invited to more parties because the child is thrilled with the gift they got, but you also got information about general knowledge for that area of your child's life, that those are the kinds of things that you want to introduce to your child, and a much wider range. What I love is in skills, they give you some suggestions and give you some really core general information things to work on with children to help, but you can customize it beyond that so that you can be very specific for your child's age. We just had somebody write in about her sister with Asperger's who's going to college, and how is she going to get along with a roommate, and how can we help her to do that? And I certainly would be looking at what are the kinds of things that the typical 20-year-old going to college, what kinds of things are they interested in building up her repertoire of knowledge around those things so that she's not going to feel uncomfortable, that she will have something to add to the conversation, right? We can do this for anybody at any age. General knowledge in the social skills under the social language domain. It's a fabulous thing. Let's take a break, and we're going to bring Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in here, talk about some topics having to do with research. It's my favorite part of the week. Stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, the host of Skills Live, and in honor of back to school, I've got a little project that you can do at home that will give your child a clear idea of what they're working for at school and help you to keep track of what they're doing. There are a couple of different elements to this project, and I want to show you first how it works and then how to do it yourself. So this element of the project stays at home. And what it says is, what are you working for today? So my son can look at this, and I like to give him 5 choices, but you can customize this for your child at whatever point they're at. 5 choices might be overwhelming to them, or they might need more choices, but you can put as many of these tags on as you want. And some of the things that I know that he likes that he might want to work for are video games, being able to swim after school, a toy. We like to get the little Happy Meal toy from McDonald's. You know, you can buy it without getting the Happy Meal. and he likes to work for Microsoft points. We're at that point in the game, and a play date. He likes to work for a play date. And these are Velcroed on so that I could switch them and put other things on. So this will hang in my kitchen, and each morning before he goes to school, he'll pick one and say, this is what I want to work for today. I made it colorful because he likes that kind of thing, but you could make it all in the same color if you wanted to do that. So he would pick this one off and say, I want to work for Microsoft points today, and this gets added to his little schedule. On the back of it, it just Velcros right on so that he can remind himself that's what he's working for, and his teacher can know that that's what he's working for today. And I broke up his day into the morning, recess, mid-morning, lunch, and afternoon. You'll notice that there's a sixth area. This is for his behavior. This is just for getting work done and paying attention, but this is for behavior, and he can be on green, yellow, or red. And my yellow and red stickers are there. So if his behavior was not being very good, this would come off, go back onto the Velcro, and he would need to put the yellow sticker on. When he was younger, he would have somebody else maintaining this for him, but now he's maintaining it himself. Also, there are stars and little tool symbols. So if he, at the end of the morning, if he feels that he has done a good job, he would rip one of these off the Velcro, don't you love Velcro, and put it right onto the morning like that, so he would know that he did a good job. If he felt that he didn't do a great job, and again, it's that self-monitoring that he's at, before it was somebody doing it for him, but if he felt he didn't do a good job and he needed to work on it, then he would put the little tool symbol on. I didn't want to put a frowny face because I just want him to know that it's something to work on. And our deal is, at the start of this school year, that if he gets 3 stars out of the 5, then he gets whatever he was working for at the end of the day. Although he does have to stay on green. By the time he gets home, he's got to be on green. So he knows, and this is really a small one, so that he can look and chart his progress for the day, know what he's working for, and that when I pick him up from school, I have a clear idea of how he did. And if I start to see that he's constantly needing to work on things for recess, then I know there might be something to talk about with him or with the teacher. It's a really good way of keeping track of things. So how do you make this? It's really simple. I've made it a little bit more complicated because I want it to last. So I laminated it, but the Velcro is really an essential thing. That's the biggest cost in this, is the Velcro. You don't even have to use a computer if you don't want to, but if you want to use the computer, all I did was I went on Google and I searched for a scrapbook tag template. And I popped that in, and I could make a text box in it, and I could fill the text box with whatever I wanted. So that was simple. This was just a text box that I put in, but I could have done it by hand. And I did this on cardstock, and the rest of the paper is just regular paper, and as I said, I did it in different colors. So you can see on this piece of paper that I stacked my templates with my text boxes, and then I just cut them out individually. And I have here a sheet of laminating film. So I laid things out that I cut. Here are the little stars, and I can just stick them on, the little green dot, a little red dot. It's sticky, so I can stick those right on, and of course I want to use as much of the paper as I can. Then I would peel another sheet of laminating, slap it on the top, cut them out. I have my handy little sticky dots for Velcro. On this one, when it got to where on the back to put all of the stickers, I put strips of Velcro. You could do that on both sides and just cut them out, but this was super duper easy to just peel off a piece of the Velcro and slap it right onto the thing, and it will last. And it also is functional, so that if I wanted to only have 3 things on here, I could, and I can change these out if I decide that these aren't being gratifying enough. I could change them to Star Wars or anything that your child likes. And I can also automatically change this, that as he progresses in the coming weeks, I can then start saying to him, oh, now you have to get 4 stars in order to get the thing on the back, and eventually say 5 stars. And to work towards generalization, I want to keep making this smaller and smaller. For right now, he's going to keep it on his desk, but eventually I would have an icon on the desk that would let him know that only during breaks to pull it out and take a look at it. And in that way, I'm starting to be able to fade all of this out. You can do this for your child at home, and probably the whole project takes less than 45 minutes, and it'll last a really long time and is adaptable. So a great project to track your child's progress. I'm sticking to my lamination sheet. It can get messy, but it's really fun to do. So good luck back to school, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. Thanks. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. It's Friday. It's 11 o'clock. It's time to welcome Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. It's really my favorite part of the week.
Thank you.
Because it's so informative for me. I always learn something when you're here, and you always put it in terms that I can
always
understand.
have a good time, too. So.
Well, good. It's reinforcing for everybody then. And we should say that you are the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
That's
you
correct.
have a fascinating job.
Thank you. I think so, too.
And I love it when people are excited about the things that they do, and you're very passionate about what you do. Another reason why I so enjoy having you come in. And I was mentioning that we had some questions in the last hour that I want to run by you, because I'm just me. I'm not an expert in anything other than, you know, I was going to say my kid, but sometimes I'm not even that. So the first question we had was from somebody writing in and saying that they have a 9-year-old on the spectrum and a 4-year-old who's typically developing, but that in both of the children, that the phrase that she used was they don't do eye contact well. And that she was curious about if there were some lessons in skills that would be useful to them. But as someone who knows a great deal about autism, what would you like to respond to that circumstance in question?
Sure. Well, you know, the first thing is there are lessons in the skills system. I'm sure you mentioned that.
Yes.
There's several different lessons and different activities related to eye contact and attending to social stimuli and things like that. So yeah, there's plenty of content in there for her at either 4 or 9-year-old level. And of course, ABA, you know, there's been probably 40 years of practice in ABA of folks using prompting and reinforcement and prompt fading, good old-fashioned ABA techniques, to improve eye contact. So those are definitely areas that can be worked on. For the 4-year-old kid, you know, lack of eye contact is certainly, as you know, one of the warning signs for autism spectrum disorders. You know, it's probably not something she needs to sound the alarm over yet, if that's all it is, if it's just eye contact. But that would certainly be a red flag for me to have a look at other things, like is her child seeking to share enjoyment with her? You know, they call it joint attention. So if something cool happens, does the kid look at that and then look at mom to see if mom's also engaged in that? If others attempt to share experiences with the 4-year-old child, does he or she then respond to that and you know, basically engage in the social dance back and forth? If the answer is no, then that's another warning sign. You know, and then of course, obviously, communication. If the child's not responding to name, if they're not, by the time they're 4, they should be able to, you know, communicate quite a bit. They should be talking. They should be going back and forth with language. If that isn't happening, again, that's a warning sign, and she would probably want to have the kid screened by an expert who is an expert in diagnosing.
You know, and I'm wondering about, because I don't know as much about Asperger's, but I hear a lot of parents who are talking about how late their kids are being diagnosed.
Sure, yeah.
And so isn't it potential, though, that a child could have, you know, language acquisition completely under control and look like everything is fine at 4, but if eye contact isn't there, and the social things aren't happening, there's the potential.
That's a very good point. That's right. And so I was sort of focusing on more autism or PDD, but you're right. It's a good point for a child who might be developing Asperger's. That could be a warning sign. Because as you say, the language and intelligence could be there, could even be superior. But what you might start to see is lack of social interest, and also the presence of some kind of repetitive or rigid or restricted interests, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be physical stereotopy, it doesn't have to be hand flapping, could be just wanting to talk about the same topic over and over, or only wanting to eat particular foods, or only wanting to watch one particular program, or over insistence on routines and rituals, right? So all of those would be warning signs as well. And you know, I have to say, Asperger's is tricky because it's not as black and white. You know, if you have a 4-year-old kid who just plain old isn't communicating, that's pretty obvious, right? But if you have a 4-year-old kid who is demonstrating sort of quirkiness or sort of just sort of different patterns of behaviors and interests, it's kind of a tough call. You know, it's not clear like where. It's not always clear to folks where does just sort of being different and interesting end, and where does being overly restricted to the point where maybe you have Asperger's begin. You know,
right? Absolutely.
And the diagnostician, what they're going to ask is it severe enough to where it creates a clinically significant impairment in the person's ability to just function and enjoy their lives?
Right.
So if the child for example, a classic example, it's an overused one, but it works, is computer geeks. So if you spend all your time on the internet and spend your in your free time you're programming computer programs and all of that stuff, and all you're interested in is computers, that's not a problem if you're still able to have friends and relationships and everything else, and you're still able to interact with other people. There's plenty of other people that are just like that too, right? I mean, you could make the same, you could say the same thing about people who are only interested in sports, right? It's a problem if it's a problem, right? So if the kid is spending so much time on the computer and is only interested in that, instead of interacting with other humans, then that's where it could start to present a problem for social development.
And this has never occurred to me to ask before, but we know with classic autism that early intervention is key to getting the kind of results that you want. Is that true of Asperger's too, or is that less studied?
Well, it's much less studied, and I would say, as a general principle, early intervention for anything, whether it's medical, behavioral, Asperger's, autism, anything else, early intervention is always going to be easier because the extent of the challenges that you're trying to make a difference on is going to be less. It's going to be smaller. So sure, I think intervening early would be easier. It's even possible, and I'm just throwing out guesses here. This is not. This opinion is not informed by data, but it would probably even be possible to detect which kids are going to later be diagnosed with Asperger's, detect really early on, maybe 3 or 4, and start addressing those concerns then. And I'll bet if you did that effectively enough, maybe the kid would never get the diagnosis later on. They would have maybe an interesting and different perspective on the world, and they'd maybe be kind of quirky and interesting and kind of a little more focused and a little more intense, maybe a little more intelligent than average, but yeah, maybe they'd never reach a level of clinically significant impairment in socialization.
Which would be incredible.
Yeah, that'd be really nice.
And so I guess that brings me to my next question, is that, she's got the 9-year-old that definitely has a diagnosis and got a 4-year-old that she's not getting the eye contact. You really don't have to have a diagnosis to benefit from the lessons that are in skills.
No, of course not. Yeah, there's nothing about ABA that says you have to have autism, We all the most effective practices in sports psychology and performance management and in business and industry and frankly even just being nice to your spouse, all of those things are affected by behavioral principles, right?
Right.
If you want to, here's the basic principle that it always comes back to. If you want to be good at something, you got to practice it a lot, and you need clear feedback, and you need lots of practice, and you need to practice across a lot of different examples. So if you want to get better at eye contact, you got to have a lot of experience getting better at eye contact. You need direct feedback. The consequences need to matter, and prompting probably. But yeah, of course, it has nothing to do with whether the person has autism.
Okay, so there should be no stigma. If the 4-year-old is doing fine except for this one thing, feel free to use the lesson and get better at it.
That's right. For example, plenty of typically developing kids might need a math tutor. That doesn't mean they have a disorder. It's not a disability. They just need some more help with math.
Support.
Yeah. So.
I personally am using some of the things in the executive functions curriculum. So there we have
I try to.
Yes, that's me. I'm working on it. Okay, so moving on to the other question that somebody wrote in about having a 20-year-old sister who's about to start college, going to go away to college, live in the dorm, and a concern because they're social skills lacking, and that she was saying, are there lessons and skills that will help her to work on being able to get along with her roommate, that empathy and patience in particular seem to be missing. And I didn't mention this to you before, that there was a concern about that there's some exhibitionism that needed to be inhibited.
Okay, yeah.
And were there lessons and skills that were going to be helpful and useful for those kinds of things?
Right, right.
So run with it, Dr. Tarbox. Tell us.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the perspective-taking lessons, which form the bulk of the cognition curriculum, those are fundamental, foundational social skills that you learn starting, I think, the basic components of it you learn as early as maybe 3 to 4 years old. But as you start to get closer to 7, 8, 9 years old, you form those foundational social skills that really, those exact same things that you do to understand other people and where they're coming from, is exactly what you continue to do as a successful adult. So it's never too late to it's not like you age out of those fundamental skills.
Right.
So, you know, we have lessons on sensory perspective taking, so just learning how to identify what other people are attending to, learning how to figure out sort of what other people know based on what they've seen or what they've been attending to, learning to identify other people's preferences, and then incorporating that into your own social behavior. So you should be able to figure out, oh, I'm talking about the same thing over and over. The person I'm talking to is no longer looking at me. They're yawning. They're looking away. You know, reading their body language. Okay, this person's bored.
Right.
I can tell that they don't prefer this topic. So what should I do? Switch topics, right? So those basic things, you and I and everyone who's successful socially do those on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So she could absolutely work on those. The neat thing about it sounds like she, you know, has, typically developing language or good, you know, high-functioning language. The nice thing about that is she could probably do a lot of that with herself. She could read the curriculum and say, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let me practice that. She could even role play with herself or with her friends or family.
One of the things that you're reminding me there were two things that I didn't mention, that eye contact not so good with this 20-year-old. And one of the things she said is that she's very aware that she has this diagnosis, but she doesn't think that she's different from anyone else, is what the person wrote in.
Okay.
And I thought that was interesting too.
It's really interesting, you know, and unfortunately, I think when you give someone a diagnosis, no matter what it is, it can be really stigmatizing. And almost automatically, someone wants to say, no, I'm not that name. Don't put that name on me. I'm myself, you know. I'm not a label. I'm not a category. I'm an individual, a human being. So you know, I'm not surprised that the person is, well, I'm not that. What's that, you know? But it is interesting, too, that you know, fundamentally part of Asperger's and autism spectrum disorders is difficulty understanding other people's perspectives. Right. So if you have a difficult time understanding how other people see things, you probably wouldn't see how other people see you. Right. And if you did see how other people saw you, you might see, oh, actually am acting quite differently. Or my social behavior isn't very successful because it's so different and it's so not sensitive to ongoing changes, you know. So that doesn't surprise me, you know. But that's one thing she could work on. You know? And we could all use some work on that.
Yes, couldn't we just? So a full range of things, though, in any case, that they could be working on skills. And I like the suggestion that maybe, you know, setting her up herself with it to see what she could work on with herself.
Sure. I mean, frankly, you know, if folks are having a tough time in their social relationships or maybe in interpersonal relationships in the office or in the workplace, just reading through some of those fundamental skills will be a good prompt for you to say, oh, maybe I'm not thinking about the other person's perspective.
Honestly.
Right?
I still am reading through the EF going, man, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And being very enriched by it. Take a second, though, and talk a little bit about the exhibitionism and how, you know, because it's an issue, right?
What is, I'm not following exactly, what does she mean by like getting undressed in front of her roommate without realizing it's inappropriate?
I assume that is, and I know that I've talked to a lot of different families that, especially with girls with Asperger's, that there is that element of taking off your clothes when you should not.
Okay, but is it like intentional for attention, or it's that they don't even get?
Well, that's the thing that I said I don't know, that you'd want to know what the, you know, are they escaping from the clothes because the clothes feel confining, or is it just reinforcing to be, you know, to feel no clothes on you, or are you trying to get somebody's attention?
Right, or is it just kind of practical that they don't get why that's inappropriate, so who cares?
Right.
I need to change my clothes, why should I hide myself, you know?
Right.
Kind of like you know, not really understanding or caring about the social norms, which, you know, to some extent, you can't blame the person. It is kind of arbitrary, you know, like, oh, I'm allowed to do this, but not that, or I'm allowed to get undressed in a men's locker room at, you know, but not, you know, somewhere else, you know, in front of other men, or, you know. So, yeah, I mean, without knowing anything about this individual's case, at least that's something that has fairly concrete, overt stimuli that you can train the person to attend to and respond to. So you should be able to establish some pretty clear rules about when, you know, what body parts can be shown, which ones cannot, and to whom, and in what circumstances. You know, so at least that's fairly overt. It might be a matter of training rules and, you know, rehearsing rules and I don't want to say practicing getting dressed and undressed, but you know what I mean, going through role playing maybe, and it should be quite teachable, you know. Although it is interesting because if the individual is doing it for attention to begin with, then you got to be careful that you're not reinforcing it by attending to it a whole bunch, you know. So teaching opportunities like that you wouldn't do in response to the inappropriate behavior, you'd do it before the inappropriate behavior or when the inappropriate behavior is not happening. We call that an antecedent manipulation, right? So you get in there as a preventive strategy. So that might be a place to start.
It's interesting as you were saying that, because I was remembering that when my son went off to kindergarten, and that we had a big set of lessons about you know, practicing, and we did it with cards. Sometimes where we showed location and a behavior, and say, you know, here's picking your nose. Can you do that?
That's great.
At the grocery store, and or you know, can you do this at school? You know, here are this, and they have rules in kindergarten. You know, you've got a kid that they're like, we would say poop at home, and you can't say poop in kindergarten. It wasn't allowed. Or fart, excuse me, you know, but we got to talk about these things. That you had to say, I just had some gas, which my son didn't know, you know, and so there and he would say, so I can never say fart again, and I would say, no, you can say it in the car when it's just us, and you can say it at home, but we really started working on, there are some things that you do in some places and some things that you don't do in other places, and he was very interested in that, and always wanted to know why.
Well, and it is so completely arbitrary, you know, but it's what you got to do. I remember when I was a child, I used to go hiking with my dad a lot, and so he would have a rule that when we're driving in his truck, once we're in the woods, once we're in the wilderness with nobody else, I could swear if I wanted. But anywhere else, it was unacceptable. No curse words, you know. But as soon as we got to the woods, go ahead, you know. Because no one can hear you.
Right. And there are things, there are different rules, different places, different, and so maybe that's one of the things in a different sense with a 20-year-old woman to talk about, you know, this is acceptable here, it's not acceptable there.
Exactly.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's take a little break, and then when we come back, Dr. Tarbox has a newer study about stereotopy that I want to know more about, and I'm sure you guys will too. So let's take a break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Thea Davis. I'm a board-certified behavioral analyst. I am the clinical director of an organization that provides intensive ABA services to children with autism. Recently, we've been using the skills curriculum, which was produced by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Skills curriculum is an online tool for providers or people working with children with autism, and it helps develop programming. There's many features that I like about this online tool. The first one is the breadth and depth of the curriculum. It covers many domains, any domain that you need to teach a child with autism. I also like the fact that as it's helping develop programming, it gives you sample IEP goals. It also gives you data sheets that you could utilize to target different skill areas. The last piece of the curriculum that I think is essential, that I have not found on any of the other curriculums, is the ability to individualize it to the child that you're working with. So you can go in and change it to your own programming, take pieces that you like, tweak it to whatever that child's needs are. The fourth part of the curriculum is a tool called e-learning, and we have begun using that for our direct care staff. It's an online series of modules which teaches the background and philosophy of applied behavioral analysis, and we've actually now added that to our training protocol. All of our therapists go through the CARD e-learning prior to even getting their instruction from the supervisors, which helps us have a more effective training and efficient training program. The part that I like the most about the skills as a clinical director is that it offers support to my supervisors. Not only does it help them develop programming, but it helps them be extremely productive with their time. I recommend this online tool for any provider, parent, or school that works with children with autism.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm here with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He's the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're so thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And you have a study that you guys did about stereotopy. Tell us, fill us in about that.
Sure, okay. So there's sort of a long-standing assumption in the autism community that stereotopy or repetitive behavior is automatically reinforced, meaning that it produces its own reinforcement. That's where the term self-stimming came from, right? Yeah. Self-stimulatory behavior implies that the behavior produces its own reinforcement.
And in the community, people refer to it just as stimming.
Stimming,
they
yeah.
Say, oh, my kid was stimming.
A lot of folks don't even know where that came from. Yeah.
And I remember the first time somebody said that to me as a parent, I said, stimming? I don't know what that is. And it was a person, before we started ABA, you know, they have just this sort of generic that they let your kid go to this group. And I said, the person referred to this, and I said, well, what's stimming? And she didn't know. She said, I don't even know what it means.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was the level of what they...
That's really scary.
It is scary.
But yeah, it's like so in common use that people have even, so don't know where it's coming from, that people even say stemming sometimes with an E, like a stem of a plant.
Yes.
It's funny.
And you go, what, is my child sprouting?
Yeah,
what
are you talking about?
Explain this to me, Lucy. I don't understand. Yeah, scary. And then you go to look up stimming in the dictionary or look it up online, and of course it isn't a word.
There's nothing,
so you can't find anything. And you go, well, my child's doing this. Somebody help me.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's this big assumption that it's always producing its own reinforcement. And so we went and looked at existing research literature, and there were some studies showing that sometimes stereotopy, I'll use the word stereotopy, that's a more scientific word. There were quite a few studies actually showing that stereotopy was maintained by some other source of reinforcement, like for example, some kids are doing it for attention, some kids are doing it to escape from academic tasks, but also quite a bit of research showing that it was maintained by automatic reinforcement. Most of the studies were with pretty small groups of children or adults, sometimes 2 or 3 individuals per study. So we basically just wanted to look at it on a larger scale and just say, well, let's just look at our kids that we serve at CARD and let's take a look at it. Let's functionally assess a whole bunch of these repetitive behaviors.
I kind of feel the need to step back for people who are new to talk just for a second about, so give us some examples of this, what stereotopy would be.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's a good idea. So the list was, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 or so different behaviors. Common stuff that people think of all the time, like hand flapping and rocking, those were in there. Lots of sort of finger or hand manipulation. Some kids will, manipulate their hands and stare at it. Turning light switches on and off, staring at ceiling fans,
opening, closing doors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Looking at the wheels on the car. Is lining up the cars included in that? All those different things.
Absolutely.
The humming.
Yeah, making sort of unintelligible sounds, squeaks, noises, whatever. Repeating phrases, echolalia, delayed echolalia, often called like video scripting, so reciting scripts from videos or cartoons, not in the context of actually playing or acting out those things, because then that would be sort of pretend play, but just with no apparent context, so just kind of repeating it to oneself.
They're the kinds of things that can make parents crazy.
Yeah.
And that you go, I just need you to stop that. I don't know why you're doing it. I just need you to stop that. We had Laura Mariquin in a couple of weeks ago, and her son, there was it was a door thing and elevators, and they would go someplace, and the doors of the elevator,
had to watch it open and shut,
would become a whole big meltdown.
Yeah, if he wasn't able to just watch it. Yeah.
Those kinds of things that really make us all want to tear our hair out. Those kinds of things.
I've been treating severe problem behavior in kids with autism for, 13, 14 years. And the number one thing that parents always want dealt with is stereotopy.
Yeah.
Above and beyond, aggression or SIB or anything else, they want stereotopy dealt with. And it does, I guess, kind of just drive you nuts, because it's so repetitive, it's so over and over,
And there was somebody who wrote in...
it does make the kid really stand out,
it goes to the heart of everything that you go, why can't my life have some semblance of normalcy? Somebody had written in the other day and said, I don't know why, some days I can just tune my kid's stereotopy out, but today it's one of those days that every time he's doing it, it's like a nail in my head. Can somebody please give me a vacation from this? And everybody wrote it and said, oh man, I've had that day. We just go, seriously,
cut it out.
In my worst autism parent moment, I remember I was having a very stressful day, and I said to my son, can you just stop having having autism for 1 minute.
Oh my
You know, and then I just wanted to like throw myself off a pier and go, oh, you know, somebody fire me from parenthood. Like, and I said it to him. Oh, bad moment. But you feel that way sometimes. Yes, no, and I tried to forgive myself for it, and he certainly is free. But you know, it's those moments where you go, you know, please, I can't take it another second. It's those kinds of behaviors.
Yeah. So, okay, so what we did was we looked at a bunch of those behaviors, and what we wanted to know was, why are they happening? What's the source of reinforcement? And so we did this across a large group of kids, and we found, by and large, actually, it was mostly maintained by automatic reinforcement. So our study did actually kind of...
Explain, so what automatic reinforcement means.
Sure, yeah. So basically, a lot of times folks will engage in behaviors, inappropriate behaviors or excessive behaviors, in order to get attention from others, in order to get access to something they want. We call that tangible. So it could be getting food or toys, or they don't want to share, they want to watch a favorite show. And a lot of times it's escape from a non-preferred task. So escaping from having to clean your room, escaping from homework, escaping from schoolwork, whatever the case may be. Sometimes just escape from even being talked to. You know, sometimes kids just want to be left alone. So all of those sources of motivation affect problem behavior and are common sources of motivation for problem behavior. Automatic reinforcement is different. It's where you've ruled out all of those, and what you've found is the behavior, it basically produces its own reinforcement. So you do it just because you like doing it. So good examples for you and I are, you know, scratching a mosquito bite. We don't do that because someone else gives us attention or something. It just feels good. Reading a good book, you know, a novel, you just get your own enjoyment out of it. Watching TV, for the most part, you just enjoy doing it, right? Eating food, all of those are just sort of automatically reinforced behaviors.
Well, I just noticed that as we were sitting here, I was playing with my fingernail.
Yeah, I'm constantly fidgeting. Yeah, constantly.
You know? And I'm not doing it because my fingernail itches or anything. I'm just sitting here playing with my fingernail because it just, you know,
it just produces its own satisfaction. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I find when I'm giving talks at conferences, I'm constantly fidgeting just anytime I'm awake. So I have to do specific things to prevent that behavior, because it's distracting if a presenter's doing that. So I have to like hold the podium with both hands, you know, on purpose. So I have my own little self-interventions.
There you go. It's wonderful. You're walking your talk. We like that. But these things, for whatever reason, are pleasing to the children.
Yeah, and so what we found was across a large group of children, for the most part, most of the behaviors were maintained by automatic reinforcement. However, some weren't. And the important take-home point to this study is, yes, it kind of confirmed what we already thought, but you can't just jump to that conclusion. You need to at least do some kind of brief functional assessment to make sure. Because if you believe that it's maintained by automatic reinforcement, but it isn't, let's say the child's actually doing it to get a rise out of you, to get attention, then what you do in response to the behavior could actually make the behavior worse. So if the child's doing it because it produces its own reinforcement, it's automatically reinforced, a common intervention for that is to prompt the child to stop doing it. It's called response blocking or response interruption. It simply means you interrupt them from doing it and direct the child to do something else instead.
A replacement behavior.
Yeah, some kind of replacement behavior. And so if you do that as a consequence for the behavior, but the child's actually doing it to get a rise out of you, then you're giving him exactly what he wants, because what he's trying to do is get you to have a reaction. Right. So you need to know what the source of motivation is for the behavior to begin with.
Okay, I tend to think of when things are automatically reinforcing as being the toughest area.
Me too, absolutely.
So, okay, I'm glad to know that I'm not in left field by myself. Okay, because when it's, my favorite thing is when it's attention. I feel like that's the easiest thing to fix in the world.
All you have to do is ignore it.
Well, you ignore that, but give attention to other things and give attention more often, and it takes care of it.
That's right.
But, you know, escape a little bit harder because there's more steps to it.
Follow through,
and you got to make whatever they're trying to escape from not as aversive. You know, there's more steps you got to follow up on. Yeah, it's a little bit harder for me. Access to something, easier for me to do, but when it's automatically reinforcing,
it's very hard because you're not in control of the reinforcer, so you can't withhold the reinforcer.
And so much you don't even know what about it is reinforcing in which way. You know that it's somehow pleasing to them, but how to get them to stop. But you guys are infinitely better at that.
Well, we hope so, or we try to do a good job, but frankly, it's hard. It is probably the single hardest part of ABA treatment for autism is getting long-standing overall reductions in stereotopy. And frankly, even at a top-quality ABA program, it can take a long time. I mean, if you target just one particular behavior and you really intensively treat that in, like is usually done in research studies, you can get a reduction in that behavior. But to get overall reductions in stereotopy can be very challenging because really what you need to do is establish lots of other alternative behaviors. So if, let's say, if you have escape-maintained problem behavior, you can teach the child to ask for a break. And if they can't speak vocally, you can teach sign language, break, you know. And that, a child can learn that, you know, in a day. And you, as long as you reinforce it consistently, that's it. You've got your replacement behavior. But for stereotopy, it's different because think about all the different leisure skills you and I have. Think about all the different leisure skills a typically developing child has. So what you really need to do is build up that whole repertoire of things to do in your downtime, essentially. And so that can take months or sometimes even years.
Wow. Well, and there's a whole other element to stereotopy that I'd love to get your opinion on, because sometimes for parents, we're the most, even though it's the thing we want you to work on, and we say it's driving me crazy, it's driving me batty, we're the most resistant to some of it because we go, really, they can't just do that? It makes them feel better. You know, and there are some behaviors that we kind of go, really, do we have to, you know? And so I know for myself that there are some things I personally was resistant to and saying, okay, and it's a big discussion amongst parents about what do you need to target and what don't you need to target. For our family, we decided that if the stereotopy was stereotopy, if it was things that were going to stop him from being able to do things, we wanted to target that.
That's right.
But for instance, my child loves to hum. He's creating the soundtrack to his own life, always. Very interested in music, and I didn't want to totally squelch that, but we set about saying, here are the circumstances in which you can hum, here are the circumstances in which you can't. I think sometimes that's made it harder because he has to draw the line for himself now at some point.
It's not as black and white. It's just quit the behavior completely.
But we didn't want to stop it completely, so we had to work on the social rules around that, and we have to remind him and prompt him and say, you know, at first it was, you can't hum here, and now it's, you're humming, is this an appropriate place to hum? And he has to answer, and usually he doesn't. He just, oops, sorry. You know, but it's hard sometimes. There's an emotional element to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you're definitely taking the right approach. I mean, you know, some really sort of hardcore, old school ABA or behavior modification types are kind of thinking, oh no, just get rid of it, it's inappropriate, make it go away. It's not, that's not really how ABA is anymore, and frankly hasn't been for quite some time. I mean, if you look at any of the major ABA textbooks and they talk about how to select behaviors for reduction and how to select behaviors for increase, and it's not arbitrary. You don't get to just pick anything you want to make it go away or make it increase. You need to go through that exact process that you're just describing, which is how does it affect the person's life? What opportunities does it open up or decrease if this behavior is present or absent, you know? So yeah, humming every now and then is not a big deal. Whistling every now and then is not a big deal. You know, some families will allow their child to have some stereotopy time in the bathroom. You know, sure, you want to go in the bathroom and hand flap, more power to you. Who cares, you know? Just don't do that in the middle of class when your teacher's trying to teach, you know? And so that, you know, you and I have that. We all have that. We have to learn rules about what's appropriate and when. And so that's a much more sophisticated way of approaching the problem of stereotopy. You really, it's not about just crushing the behavior anymore. It's about making it so the behavior doesn't interfere with the person's ability to get the most out of their life. That's what really matters.
That's really what we're going for. Well, absolutely fascinating. I so enjoy when you're here.
Thank you. Me too.
It's so interesting to me, and I know it is to you guys as well because you write in and say that. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'm not going to be here next week. I'm going to tell you that right now. I am in upstate New York next Friday.
Oh, okay, great.
So I'm adjudicating a play festival at my alma mater.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That sounds really cool.
It will be wonderful and fascinating. But so we will not be here live, but the week after we'll be back with some interesting things to talk about. I got some things that I want to ask you about. So we're going to take a short break, and we will be back in just a moment. We're here here today with Sarah Cho, who is the managing supervisor of the CARD Fresno office, and it's a special treat for us to have her with us today.
Yeah.
And we're going to be asking her to talk to us about working with children who are nonverbal. So when a child is not speaking, are we saying that they're non-vocal or non-verbal?
The correct terminology is non-vocal.
Okay.
Because when we're saying vocal, vocal means sound. So sound is being emitted.
Okay.
So verbal means that the child is able to communicate to another person that they need something, they have desires, they have wants, and a verbal response might be handing a picture.
Okay.
It might also be a sign. Might also be pressing a button to ask for something.
Okay.
Those would all be considered verbal behavior. But if they don't have speech, we might say that they're non-vocal. So imagine then if you have a child who's not developing speech typically, they have no way to tell their parent what they need, you're going to see frustration levels increase. And if I don't have a way to appropriately get my point across, I'm going to start developing some really bad excessive behaviors to communicate.
Right.
So that's when we start to see the noncompliance, the tantrums, the aggression, even self-injurious behaviors emerge. We're going to use really short and concise and clear speech. Pair it with a gesture. And then when the child starts responding, immediately praise. Right. Immediately give a reward. So then that way the child is starting to understand, I got it. I'm understanding what she's wanting me to do. At the same time as working on receptive instructions, we do need to teach the child also a way for them to communicate too.
Right.
So we're going to start working on very basic requesting behavior. So they're able to request for things. And so the two kind of go hand in hand.
If there are no sounds, then maybe we start with signs.
You could start with signs, or you could start with an icon. As a parent, you're going to know your kid best in the sense that you're going to know kind of what they like. If you have a kiddo who likes to look at pictures, who likes to look at books, maybe an icon is going to be something that would be preferred, and they would get really good at giving it. If you have a child who is, you're like, wow, you know, they have really great fine motor. Maybe they can already string beads. Maybe they can do a shape sorter. You know, the ability to manipulate their hands and their fingers is pretty solid. Maybe you might want to work on some very basic signs.
Okay, so taking whatever the strength is and running with that.
Absolutely. So let's say that you do an icon or you do a sign. Both of those forms of communication have been linked to development of expressive speech. So, you know, if that's something that we're starting with today because we need to get through today, that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to end up doing tomorrow.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're at the end of the week, and there have been a lot of things covered. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow is the Walk Now for the 10th annual Walk Now for Autism at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. I will be there with our Autism Live crew. If you want to have an opportunity to meet either me or Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson or a wonderful technical director that I talk about all the time that you've seen in our cooking segments, Emily Goodwin, she's going to be there as well, and some other people that will be a part of our entourage. And we're going to be interviewing people such as yourself and getting the real story on the ground, you know, being the man on the street, getting the real story. And we hope that if you're there and you see us, come up to us. We want to talk to you and get interviews because we're going to be showing those hopefully next week, either before I leave or while I'm gone. So really hoping to have a wonderful time there and get to meet as many people as we can. And I know they're expecting 25,000 plus people. So come on down and meet and greet. CARD has a booth there, but we will not be at the CARD booth. We will be out and amongst the crowd doing our interviews. So look for us. A really wonderful event. By the way, it's free. You have the opportunity to fundraise if you want to as you're doing the walk. But I like to remind everybody that wherever you are on this journey is okay, and that there are elements to this journey. When you're in the beginning, you need to focus on yourself and your child. And I don't say that lightly, but if fundraising is not the thing that you can do right now, don't feel overwhelmed by that. Forgive yourself for that, because we all have been there. There are other things that you can be doing to be helping everybody, but your first priority at that point in time is to help yourself and your child. You need to get as educated as you can and get access to as many resources as you possibly can. You'll have plenty of time down the road to fundraise. You'll have plenty of time down the road to help everybody else's child. I guarantee you that. Having been on this path myself and seen so many other parents, same thing, that there's a period of time when you got to focus on what's happening at home, and later on you'll be able to help everybody else. But part of what will help you is being there and getting access to the resources at the resource fair. So I really hope you'll take advantage of that and do that. We're going to provide you with information that we get there. So if you can't get there, if you're someplace else in the world, or if you're in the Los Angeles area, but it's really too much, too overwhelming at this point, and I get it. Believe me, I get it. There were so many conferences that I wanted to go to. There are still conferences I can't get to because my priorities are, the things that are happening at home. But if we will get you access to as much of the information as we possibly can. That's a thing that we look forward to. So just want to remind you about that. And then also want to remind you that next week is a short week for us here at Autism Live, because I am going away. And so we'll be here Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but we will not be with you on Thursday or Friday. So it'll be 2 weeks from today that we're back in the studio on Friday with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, which we thoroughly enjoy. Okay, do we have time to show my Friday fair, Emily? And you have it all queued, I'm sure. On Fridays at the end, because I can't show it any other time, from time to time, I like to show Brett Myler, a young man who was diagnosed with autism and recovered. And in a speech that he did at the 20th anniversary gala for CARD, I was there that night. He was 19 years old, I believe, and he spoke to this huge crowd that was a star-studded crowd. I think there were people who are Hollywood stars who were there and spoke, who did not do as well as he did, frankly. So keep that in mind as you're watching, that he is speaking to a huge, intimidating crowd. This is Brett Myler. Take a look.
Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? My name is Brett Myler, and I recovered from autism when I was 8 years old due to the extraordinary and selfless efforts of Dr. Doreen Grant-Bichet, Kathy Visconde, Evelyn Cumm, and many other amazing therapists. How does a person show gratitude for being taken from a future of institutions and the inability to communicate even basic needs to getting to have a normal, independent life? What do you say to the people that gave up so very much to give you that life? Since I was 8 years old, my parents have always talked about this. If we saw a clearly autistic person now in public, it was always, do you realize that would have been you if not for Doreen? Or, imagine what your life would be like if they hadn't decided to be therapists and had done something else with their lives. Or, do you know what those people sacrificed? How much they gave up to get you here? Of course, I always agreed with them because in my head, intellectually, I understood that all of it was true. But I never really felt it. In my gut, in my heart. I never really felt how great a gift I had been given because of what they had sacrificed for me. Well, I don't know why it took so long to happen. At least it did. And I finally felt a massive sense of gratitude in the pit of my stomach, in my heart, for what they had done for me. It was about 9 months ago. I was 18 years old and I had a really great day at work. I was just made Employee of the Month at the grocery store where I work. I had just gotten my first semester grades in college, which were very good, and I overall just had a really great day. It occurred to me that none of the things I had done that day would have been possible without Card and Dr. Grandpichet's help. College, work, driving my truck to a friend's house, none of it would be happening. I got home from work that night, and I went to my mother and said, "The next time you talk to them, tell them I said thank you. Thank you for everything." At first she didn't know what I was talking about, but she got it after a few seconds and started to cry. She hugged me and said, "Don't worry, they already know. I told them." I'm told, but I don't really remember, that when I was 4 years old, one of my therapists really liked the song by the band Oasis called Wonderwall and taught me how to sing it. I guess it was super funny. My mom always heard my struggles with the words of that song, and they dedicated it to me when I graduated from high school. I thought it was nice, but what is a Wonderwall anyway? My mom said it's someone who gives up everything to do something that everyone else thinks is impossible. From what I have been told, it has been a very hard fight to get this kind of care funded and accepted to the point that it is now. And I have been told that CARD has had a major role in getting this kind of care to many, many children. I thank you for all that you have sacrificed to help me and those like me. So, at this time, I think it is only fitting to dedicate those same words from the song Wonderwall back to CARD, and especially to Dr. Doreen Grandpichet. Here it goes. And all the roads you had to walk were winding, and all the lights that led you here are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how, because maybe I know you were the ones that saved me, and after all, you're my Wonderwall.
I love to show this video, but I can only show it on Fridays as we're getting ready to leave because I get into the ugly cry. And I deliberately didn't watch it as much this time so that I wouldn't be in the ugly cry. But we're at the end of the week. It's been a wonderful week. I can't tell you how privileged I feel to be able to be here with you, and I want to be a resource for you. So please use and abuse that connection and tell me what you need to know. As this show ends, the conversation continues. Let's go through some of the different ways that you can get a hold of us throughout the weekend. That you can always email us, right? Email us, we'll get your question, we'll answer your show on the next live show, but somebody will get back to you with a written response. It's a wonderful way of getting a hold of us. You can still phone in. If nothing else, you can leave a message and we'll get back to you. But somebody will still be here up to 5 p.m. Pacific time today. You can still be Facebooking with us. You can still be leaving us comments on the YouTube channel. You can be downloading the shows. You can be tweeting us. You can be downloading the shows or just watching them on Blip. You can subscribe to us there on Blip, and you can also be downloading shows on iTunes, and of course, as Emily's showing you, YouTube. There's all those places to be able to watch the videos, places on each one of those sites to be able to comment. But again, you can always be emailing us. I can't tell you how reinforcing it is for us. Look at me making friends with the jargon. But it is very exciting for us when you guys write in and let us know what you're thinking and feeling. Even if it's something that you perceive as negative, we perceive it as helping us to get better at what we're doing, which that's why we're here. Don't be mistaken. We're here to provide information for you. That's right. I'm talking to you. I always like to say I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom. So I want to know directly from you what helps you and what doesn't help you. And if there's topics that we're not hitting that would be helpful to you, let us know. Even if it's you write in and say, I just don't even know what question to ask, but I'm tuning in. Because I know that's the boat that I was in for the longest time. I was like, I don't even know what to ask. But if we listen to each other long enough, the questions will start to arise. So please take part in the conversation. If you're going to the walk tomorrow in Los Angeles, make sure that you drop by and say hello to us, because we really want to meet you. So until Monday, when we're back at 9 a.m., please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.